Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor. Madam Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Carlton.
Here.
Assemblywoman Considine.
Here.
Assemblywoman Dickman.
Here.
Assemblywoman Duran.
Here.
Assemblyman Flores.
Present.
Assemblyman Frierson.
Here.
Assemblywoman Hardy.
Here.
Assemblywoman Kasama.
Here.
Assemblywoman Martinez.
Present.
Assemblywoman Marzola.
Here.
Assemblyman O'Neill.
Here.
Assemblywoman Tolles.
Here.
Chair Howdigi.
Here. Thank you so much, Madam Secretary. Please indicate that all committee members are present. Welcome to our audience tuning in over the internet. Before we start, I would like to make some housekeeping announcements. Please remember all exhibits, written testimony, and amendments must be submitted by noon on the business day prior to the committee meeting. Persons wishing to provide testimony or attend the meeting virtually must pre-register online at the legislature's website. The public is strongly encouraged to submit written testimony in advance of the meeting by emailing the Assembly Committee on Commerce and Labor. Members, please remember to keep your cameras on at all times. This will help us ensure that we have a quorum unless you are stepping away for non-committee related business. Members and presenters, please remember to be muted at all times. Unmute yourself to speak and then promptly mute yourself when you are done. Thank you to everyone who has joined us today, and let's get started with our agenda. We have one bill on the agenda item for today's hearing, and it is Assembly Bill 387. With that, I will open the hearing on Assembly Bill 387, which revises provisions relating to midwives. I have Assembly Member Danielle Monroe Moreno with us to present. When you're ready, Assembly Member, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair and members of the committee. For the record, I am Assemblywoman Danielle Monroe Moreno, representing Assembly District 1. Tonight, I am here to present Assembly Bill 387, which establishes the Board for Licensed Certified Professional Midwives. I am joined tonight by Tiffany Hoffman and Amanda McDonald, both of whom are midwives here in Nevada. One of my co-sponsors for the legislation, Assemblywoman Peters. And we are joined by Dr. Sandy Koch, a respected Nevada OBGYN. I will open the presentation, and as you know, we're at that time of the session where we're multitasking. So I will be turning the presentation over after my remarks to first Assemblywoman Peters, and then to Ms. Hoffman and Ms. McDonald, who will have a PowerPoint presentation, and finally ending with comments from Dr. Koch. And when they're finished, hopefully I'll be able to jump back in to go through the details of the bill and the amendment, which is pretty lengthy, and I apologize for that, and answer any questions that you all might have. So, midwifery has been a practice in the United States for hundreds of years. Midwives provide care throughout the prenatal, delivery, and postnatal stages of childbearing to women who are healthy and experiencing a normal pregnancy. A midwife monitors the physical, psychological, and social well-being of birthing parent through the childbearing cycle. When needed, a midwife identifies and refers the few women who need OB attention. Midwives who attend births at home and in birth centers have excellent outcomes and cost approximately 1/3 less than hospital deliveries, the latter of which account for approximately $110 billion a year in health care cost, which is just in the United States. The advantages of care by midwives include excellent outcomes at lower costs, healthier babies, and Medicaid savings. Each childbearing person on Medicaid who chooses an out-of-hospital birth with a midwife can help lower Medicaid cost, since Medicaid would otherwise pay for a hospital birth at a greater cost with a higher likelihood of a cesarean section. According to analysis by the Washington State Department of Health, its Medicaid program saved almost $500,000 in cesarean section reductions alone over a 2-year budget cycle, with licensed midwives attending just 2% of the births. During last legislative session, for those of you that were here, I brought before the body AB 169, which created the Maternal Mortality Review Committee. I brought that because the United States has some of the highest numbers of child and maternal mortality. We are a developed nation, and why do we have those numbers? And those numbers are births that are within hospitals. We were able to pass the Maternal Mortality Review Committee bill last session. This session, we're building upon that bill to have data collected for communities of color that were omitted in last session's bill. I see this bill, AB 387, as another option for mamas to have healthy babies. The reason this is personal for me, during my first session here, my firstborn was giving birth to her firstborn, and she decided to use a midwife, which at the time I thought she and her wife were absolutely crazy because I had all my children in the hospital. But I was able to go over the hill to California to be with my daughter as she and her wife gave birth to their firstborn at home in a pool. It was the most amazing, holistic experience I've ever experienced. And I realized that we need more options for mamas. And as we lived through COVID-19 and moms could not go into hospitals or birthing parents into hospitals with their partners, I truly realized we needed options. But I was also getting calls from some of my constituents who had utilized midwives in our community, and some of them had some serious negative outcomes. And they asked me, could you please provide a licensure for midwives? Well, while I agree with them that their negative outcomes were traumatic, I also understand that this has been a practice that has gone on for thousands of years, and I didn't want to negatively impact those who did not wish to have a license. So that's the premise for AB 387. Licensure is a key to providing safe care for Nevadans that is consistent with the scope of practice defined by the profession. It also makes midwifery more accessible and enables them to participate in an integrated system that includes opportunities for consultation, collaboration, referral, and multidisciplinary peer review. Currently, Nevada does not have a license for midwives. However, the state does not permit midwives from delivering babies or providing care throughout the birthing cycle. Ms. Hoffman and Ms. McDonald have been working with me for over a year now to bring this bill to this legislative body. We have been involved with stakeholder meetings, numerous stakeholder meetings, up until Saturday night when I think we had almost a 4-hour meeting, and receiving amendments to this bill up until 2:30 today. We have done our due diligence. It's not a perfect bill. I don't know if there ever is one, but we're trying to get to perfection. So with that, I will turn the presentation over to Ms. Hoffman and to Ms. McDonald. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Ms. Hoffman, Ms. McDonald, when you're ready, we will go to you, and then I believe we go to Ms. Peters next.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno and the rest of the committee for this opportunity to speak. And thank you for the baby cheeks at the beginning of this to make us feel right at home. My name is Tiffany Hoffman, and I'm here with my colleague Amanda McDonald, and we're certified professional midwives practicing in Reno, as well as licensed midwives in the state of California. We want to talk to you today about our interest in the licensure for certified professional midwives in the state of Nevada. Nevada has a proud history of birth freedom, as well as a history of contentious relationships between home and hospital providers. This contentious history dates back to methods in which birth was moved from the home to the hospital setting, and the over-medicalization of birth in America. Writing this bill has been a focused effort to reduce harm, to honor traditions, to increase accessibility, improve outcomes for all birthing people while working to build bridges and close the divide between home and hospital providers. We have reviewed research, statements from major organizations invested in the safety of community birth, listened to consumers of all types of midwifery services, families that have experienced losses and bad outcomes, every type of midwife, the hospital association, physicians, lobbyists, and legislators in creating this bill. Everyone interested in this topic is extremely passionate, and there's little middle ground. Every attempt has been made to come to a center. The questions we asked in creating this bill over the last year were, how can we improve safety and satisfaction for consumers? How do we honor and respect the history of midwifery while advancing the profession? How do we protect choice for Nevada families? What is the bottom line to improve outcomes according to available research? How can we best improve access to community birth for all Nevada families? How do we increase the number of underrepresented midwives to provide culturally and linguistically congruent care? And how do we begin to bridge the divide between community and hospital providers? And so we have a presentation to share. Okay, so what is a certified professional midwife? A CPM is an autonomous primary perinatal care provider for pregnant people with healthy pregnancies. We are distinctly different from the profession of nursing or medicine. We provide comprehensive care prenatally during labor and birth, during the postpartum period. We also provide well-woman, well-person care in the perinatal period, including Pap smears and STI testing. We are experts in the wellness-centered model of care and the physiologic approach to pregnancy and birth. Our expertise in providing care in home and freestanding birth centers. We are the only type of perinatal care provider required to have experience in the community birth setting for certification. Community birth is defined as a planned birth outside of the hospital setting in homes and in birthing centers. So what are the benefits of CPM care? Because we are able to offer a truly personalized one-on-one physiologic approach to perinatal care for healthy pregnancies, we see a significant reduction in intervention during labor and birth. For example, we see substantially lower rates of inductions and cesareans compared with the medical model of care, and we pride ourselves on providing client-centered care and highly value shared decision-making. CPMs can also provide extensive postpartum support during the first 6 weeks after birth. CPMs can help provide access to care in rural areas and those areas experiencing a perinatal care shortage. Community midwifery care has recently come into the spotlight during the pandemic as families have become concerned about acquiring COVID in the hospital and having restrictions on the attendance of their friends, family, or doula during their hospital stay. Midwifery care and access to midwives in all settings were associated with significant increases in spontaneous vaginal births, successful vaginal births after cesarean, breastfeeding at 6 months, and a significant reduction in C-section rates, preterm birth, and low birth weight. We will speak further to this later in the presentation. Benefits of CPM care in the state of Nevada also include Medicaid cost savings due to lower intervention rates and cesarean rates. This map shows the current licensing trends in the United States. 36 states offer licensure to CPMs, and as you can see, Nevada stands alone in the West as the only unlicensed state. So then as we consider licensure, what has been shown to improve home birth outcomes? And what we see is its collaboration, integration, and autonomous practice. The reason that the U.S. home birth outcomes cannot be directly compared to the improved outcomes of home birth in other countries is because the lack of integration of CPMs into our medical system, a lack of collaboration between perinatal care providers, and the inability of CPMs to practice to their full scope. According to the Mapping Integration of Midwives Across the United States study, which was published in 2018, Outcomes are best globally when midwives are regulated and practiced to their full scope. This study convened a multidisciplinary task force with expertise in maternity services, research, public health, midwifery, obstetrics, epidemiology, consumer advocacy, and/or roles in midwifery legislation, regulation, and law. In 2014, The Lancet reported that the national investment in midwives and in their work, environment, education, regulation, and management is crucial to the achievement of national and international goals and targets in reproductive, maternal, newborn, and child health. According to Midwifery and Quality Care published in the Lancet, on a global scale, maternal and perinatal outcomes are better in jurisdictions where midwives are regulated and have the legislative authority to practice to their full scope across birth settings, including collaborating with or referring with other health professionals. And so we've created some slides. These are midwifery integration scores, and the midwifery integration scoring system was created by a multidisciplinary group of experts to determine whether integration of midwives into the healthcare system improved outcomes. A MIS score of 100 would indicate that a family in that state would have full access to high quality maternity care in all settings. Higher MIS scores were associated with significantly more access to midwives, significantly higher rates of physiologic birth outcomes, lower rates of obstetric interventions, and fewer adverse neonatal outcomes. Nevada's MIS score is 29, which ranks us 35th in the nation. The top 3 MIS scores are Washington at 61, New Mexico at 59, and Oregon at 58. These 3 top scoring states have a common theme: integration and regulation. CPMs in all 3 of those states are reimbursed by Medicaid, and they can own and work in birth centers as well. Regulation has been identified by the International Confederation of Midwives, also known as ICM, as one of the pillars of a strong midwifery profession. This second MIS slide, MIS score is also correlated with density of midwives and access to care across birth settings. In the United States, about 10% of births are attended by midwives. 50 to 75% of births are attended by midwives in other high-resource countries. On this slide, we see that the states with higher MIS scores all have significantly higher rates of midwifery care than Nevada's mere 5%, and all 3 were also higher than the national average. We see a significant increase in spontaneous vaginal births after cesareans, and breastfeeding both at birth and 6 months. You can also see a huge difference in cesarean rates. Nationally, higher MIS scores are correlated with lower rates of premature birth, low birth weight, and neonatal mortality. Further, there was a birth settings report by the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine, and they created an ad hoc committee of public health stakeholders in academia, healthcare provider organization, women's health organizations, and third-party payers, and they sought to explore the differences across birth settings and outcomes in the United States. Why did they look at birth settings? They started this report because the U.S. has the highest mortality and morbidity rates among all high-resource countries, despite spending the most. Care that is evidence-based, linguistically and culturally appropriate, and safe is not available to everyone. This is all despite the fact that the majority of U.S. pregnancies are low risk. Additionally, Black birthing people and babies die at rates much higher than their white counterparts. They are 2 to 6 times more likely to die in childbirth, depending on where in the country they are giving birth. Conclusions that the birth settings report came to is that the U.S. maternity care system underutilizes evidence-based beneficial care and overuses care that is not medically indicated. In other words, it is either too much too soon or too little too late. And we are striving for the right amount of care at the right time. Interventions in care provided too much too soon and too little too late contribute to high levels of morbidity and mortality. Not yet. Sorry. We're going to go back one slide. So to improve outcomes generally,
we're going to flip back through.
To improve outcomes generally, what was advised is to provide respectful, high-quality care, provide true informed consent and informed refusal around decision-making regarding risk in all maternity care settings, integrated and collaborative care between all birth settings, birth settings, increase access to affordable, safe, respectful, linguistically and culturally appropriate prenatal and mental health care that works to reduce disparities created by structural racism and the long-term effects. It ensures levels of payment for maternity and newborn care across birth settings and increased diversity, size, and distribution in the maternity and newborn care workforce. The suggestions for improving hospital birth were developing midwifery-led units in the hospital setting, greater collaboration between maternity care providers, teaching and providing respectful care and true informed consent and refusal, and decreasing unnecessary intervention. For the home and birth center setting, the things that were recommended to be improved were integrating home and birth centers into a regulated maternal newborn care system, shared care and access to safe and timely transport, seamless transfer across settings, appropriate and ongoing client risk assessment and risk selection, well-qualified maternity care providers with training to manage first-line complications, access to licensure at the state level, and mechanisms for obtaining and maintaining accreditation for birth centers to improve access and quality of care, and the ability of all CNMs, CMs, CPMs who meet ICM standards to practice to the full extent of their scope. So then, how does AB 387 help to improve the safety of community birth? The goal of AB 387 is to improve outcomes, provide accountability, and improve accessibility, all while providing CPMs the ability to practice autonomously into their full scope. AB 387 would require a MEEC accredited education after January 1st, 2025, with the opportunity to apply for an extension to this date for rural students and students from groups with marginalized identities, which are defined as an identity that causes or has historically caused a person of such an identity to be disproportionately subjected to discrimination, harassment, or other negative treatment as a result of that identity. AB 387 would require direct on-site supervision of students and midwife assistance by certified professional midwives. AB 387 would require basic training requirements for midwifery assistants. It would also require anti-bias and anti-racism training for license renewal in statute. Why promote MEEC accredited education for CPMs? USMERA is a coalition of representatives of various national midwifery associations, credentialing bodies, and education accreditation agencies. USMERA includes the National Association of Certified Professional Midwives, the Association of Certified Nurse Midwives and their certifying agency, AMCB, the National Association to Advance Black Birth, and the North American Registry of Midwives. USMERA's vision was to come up with ways to help build an integrative healthcare system where everyone has access to midwives and midwifery care that improves health. One of the ways they recommended to work towards the goal was to encourage states presenting new licensure bills for CPMs to require MEEC accredited education for midwives certifying after January 1st, 2020. 11 of the last 12 jurisdictions to pass CPM licensure laws since have included this USMERA language, requiring an accredited education in their licensing bills. All the other states currently working to pass licensure laws are including USMERA language as well. An overview. An overview of the current routes of, what is a MEEC accredited program and its benefits? One route to become a CPM is a MEEC accredited education. MEEC, the Midwifery Education Accreditation Council, accredits standalone midwifery programs in institutes as well as college programs offering degrees in midwifery. MEEC is approved to accredit midwifery programs by the U.S. Secretary of Education. The education requirements required by MEEC for CPMs meet International Confederation of Midwives minimum educational standards without any additional CEUs. This route honors the legacy of learning through the centuries-old apprenticeship model while adding a standardized evidence-based didactic component that will foster well-rounded community midwifery providers. This route requires the completion of a 3-year accredited education program as well as a minimum 2-year apprenticeship with a NARM and school-approved preceptor. Candidates may then sit for their credentialing exam. MEEK accreditation verifies that a program meets established standards of education. It provides an opportunity for inter and intra-institutional cooperative learning and practices. This can be the basis for future collaborative relationships with hospital-based providers. MEEK promotes ongoing improvement of programs and creates a system for accountability for students, preceptors, and staff. It also helps guide financial support for midwifery education. NACPM, as well as 6 other organizations in US MERA, support MEEK accredited education as a requirement for the newly licensing states. To be clear, AB 387 would only require MEEK accredited education for newly credentialing CPMs. Current CPMs trained to the PEP process would only need to complete the Midwifery Bridge program previously mentioned by 2025.
How do we go back? We went forward one too many. Is it this guy?
Yeah, that guy.
Okay.
Sorry, we're technologically challenged, so we are doing our best here.
There we go. There we go.
Okay. So then the other way to become a CPM is through the PEP process. According to NARM, the PEP process originally began as a way for midwives with experience and skills to have their qualifications evaluated for credentialing. PEP is an educational competency-based evaluation process with 3 different educational requirements before sitting for the credentialing exam. Part 1, a list of general education requirements, reading material, and resources are provided to candidates to be studied. Part 2, a minimum 2-year apprenticeship with a NARM-approved preceptor. And Part 3, a clinical skills verification, which requires 2 preceptors to sign off on skills competency. Then PEP students are qualified to sit for the NARM exam for credentialing. Some PEP-trained CPMs go on to complete a Midwifery Bridge Certificate. The Midwifery Bridge Certificate was created to fill a perceived gap between PEP education and minimum ICM competencies and emergency skills. The International Confederation of Midwives supports the creation of international minimum educational standards for midwives. The Midwifery Bridge Certificate requires 15 CEUs in emergency skills, 15 in emergency newborn skills, and 20 CEUs designated as other. This program must be completed within 5 years. So why is accreditation and licensure good for the public? And how is it going to benefit Nevada families? We know that MEEK accredited schools are meeting certain standard criteria for their curriculum. We know that the full gamut of educational topics are being required in a student's didactic course. This is important for the health and safety of Nevada families. Whether certified or not, I think midwives can agree that there is a difference between being able to pass a certification exam and truly understanding midwifery topics in depth required for safe practice. MEEK education helps ensure topics are not being overlooked or skimmed over. There is accountability for the schools, accountability for preceptors, and accountability for the students. If the students are having an issue with the preceptor, they have a resource for help. If a preceptor has a concern about a student, they have resources to help. This promotes the integrity of skills development and appropriate and productive student-preceptor relationships and expectations. Thoroughly and properly trained new midwives help keep families choosing to birth at home or in birthing centers safely. Accreditation can also save the state money. MEEK accredited schools already have processes in place for monitoring and evaluating students' education, so states can trust that the schools have provided appropriate education and training without needing to create their own state process to evaluate applicants before licensure. Licensure provides a way to hold midwives accountable if practicing outside of their scope or otherwise practicing unsafely. If there is a bad outcome, there are official processes and paths to possible recourse for both the family and the state if warranted. Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno went over some of these same figures, so I won't spend a lot of time on this slide. What we know is that there is substantial cost savings to using CPMs for care. Nevada's cesarean rate is 34%, and our vaginal birth after cesarean rate is only 12%. The nationwide out-of-hospital birth cesarean rate is 5%, and versus the 26% rate for first-time cesarean in low-risk birthing people in the hospital setting. Why is accreditation and licensure good for the midwifery profession? Accreditation promotes standards of practice and advocates for rigorous preparation. As I previously noted, this is important for public health and safety. One of the big arguments against requiring MEAC accredited education is that of access for students. MEAC education is often much more expensive than the PEP process route. However, an overlooked part of the discussion of student access is the availability of funding. Many MEAC accredited schools have federal funding options via grants and loans available, just like a standard college program would. Mary Lawler, the executive director of NACPM National, has been working to secure funding for midwifery education through the Midwives for Maximizing Optimal Maternity Services Act of 2019. That act secures $35 million of funding through Title VII and VIII available for midwifery students in accredited programs, for expanding midwifery programs and to help support more preceptors. There's $2.5 million designated specifically for underrepresented students in midwifery education to help support the development of a midwifery workforce that represents the racial and ethnic demographic of the childbearing population. The funding would be available starting in 2021 to 2025. Another access concern is having to leave one's community to complete their education. There are several MEAC accredited schools which require only occasional travel to campus and in some cases none at all. And students can remain in their own communities 100% of the time working with a local preceptor. If you are interested in a full list of MEAC accredited schools along with tuition costs, physical attendance requirements, and availability of federal funding options, we have that available. As for licensure, it fosters accountability. Peer review is typically required for license renewal. Midwives can hold each other accountable, knowing what the standards of practice are supposed to be. This is where consistency and knowledge base and skills also come into play. Through these peer reviews, midwives can help each other find potential deficits or oversights in their practices, and licensure would open up the opportunity for interdisciplinary peer reviews. Licensure can help to facilitate recognition and broader acceptance of out-of-hospital midwifery by other healthcare providers. We cannot speak to Southern Nevada's climate, but here in Northern Nevada, we are often called lay midwives, which is perceived by midwives with formal education as offensive. We see our clients being referred to as having no prenatal care if a transfer to the hospital occurs in labor, even when the staff has been provided with a full chart complete with standard lab and ultrasound reports and complete prenatal and labor records. Referrals to perinatologists are unavailable altogether in Northern Nevada. For clients with gestational diabetes, many dietitians will not accept our referrals. Many pelvic floor therapists cannot or will not accept our referrals. Families will receive safer and more comprehensive care if CPMs are recognized as legitimate, autonomous healthcare providers with more collaboration and integration available. Studies show that intraprofessional teamwork is essential to the provision of high-quality maternity care. When professionals collaborate on decision-making and when coordinated care is seamless, fewer intrapartum, neonatal, and maternal deaths occur during critical obstetric events. Our AB 387 would also specifically define supervision. A licensed midwife must be physically present on the premises and able to intervene when a student midwife performs any clinical tasks at births, prenatals, or postpartum care visits. Assistants would also be subject to this rule. This is a matter of safety for families. It also provides protections for both students and assistants and their preceptors and the supervising midwives. NACPM supports this stance on direct supervision. Some midwives in Idaho became concerned about this rule, which is included in several other states' licensure laws. They asked what would happen if a midwife needed to go to sleep or to get food or to check on another client. And NACPM's response was very simple. If a person is at a stage of labor where they require midwifery care, then that midwife must be in attendance. If a student does not perform any clinical task, such as a cervical exam, check vitals, listening to fetal heart tones, et cetera, and they are only there to provide emotional support and physical comfort measures, basically acting as a birth doula, then they are not in violation of the NACPM essential documents. Any clinical assessment of the client without supervision is a violation of NACPM essential documents. We also require...
It's not loving me today, is it?
No.
It's not the end. There we go.
Okay. Midwife assistants. AB 387 would require midwife assistants to have a basic knowledge and training before attending births with their supervising midwife. Details have not been completed, but requirements would not be extensive or complicated. California currently requires their midwife assistants to have training if they are not a student at a MEAC accredited school. I know there are concerns that this would limit access to assistants, and midwives may be more likely to attend births alone. Luckily, especially now with the pandemic, there are a variety of online assistant trainings, and supervising midwives could help their assistants learn the necessary hands-on skills before assistants begin attending births. And the Midwifery Board would be able to allow those midwives to create a program for their own assistants. And so we believe licensure and regulation is essential for meaningful integration and collaboration between CPMs and other healthcare professionals. This in turn has been shown to improve outcomes. We want to provide respectful and safe care to our Nevada families choosing community birth as autonomous providers practicing to our full scope. And as the slide says, regulation is a mechanism by which the social contract between the midwifery profession and society is expressed. Society grants the midwifery profession authority and autonomy to regulate itself. In return, society expects the midwifery profession to act responsibly, ensure high standards of midwifery care, and maintain the trust of the public. Thank you so much for your time this evening. We know that you are busy doing really important work, and we have a whole new appreciation for what it is that you do. If you have any questions, we are here to answer those. Stop share.
Thank you for your presentation. Assemblymember Monroe Moreno, would you like to go to Assemblymember Peters or Dr. Koch next? Okay, Assemblymember Peters, it looks like.
Thank you, Chair and Committee. For the record, my name is... Oh no, my camera just failed. What is that? Well, I guess I can just do voice if you can hear me.
We can hear you.
Okay, sorry. I'm on a loaner computer today. I apologize. Well, my name is Sarah Peters. I represent Assembly District 24, and I just want to thank Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno for bringing this bill, and I'm honored to be a co-sponsor and co-presenter of AB 387. There's been a lot of misinformation circulating about the genesis of this bill, and it's unfortunate that a community made up of a value system designed around support would attempt to demonize those who would seek to enhance access and financial coverage and securities to a greater number of birthing people in our state. What I hope today's presentation does is set the record straight regarding the intent of this legislation and clear the names of those attempting to address these basic and simple issues. I'm a home birth mother. I hired a midwife for all 3 of my births. I had insurance coverage during all 3 of my births. However, my desired service was not covered under 2 of those births because we have no regulatory certification for midwives in Nevada. The 3rd one wasn't covered because of an insurance loophole. All in all, the cost of birthing my 3 babies at home was more than out-of-pocket maximums, and my midwife had to set up a payment plan with me that was such a financial burden, I almost went back to the hospital model for fear of inability to pay my other bills. I'm going to check my privilege here because I was in a stable financial position where the burden was real but absorbed in our ability to, quote, trim the fat of our small family budget. I'm also a white cisgendered woman, which makes it easier for me to find a job and obtain coverage from both insurance and physicians. So I always had a backup plan. Additionally, my family is local and supportive. My mother used the same midwife who birthed my children when she birthed me. I knew that if I ever needed help, I had a safety net in my privilege. Not every birthing person is so lucky. Around 60% of births in Nevada are had by people with Medicaid insurance. The Medicaid provider model requires providers to enroll with the state and provide credentialing. Although there are some exceptions, Medicaid, as a general rule, requires specific credentialing to provide reimbursement for services. To date, Nevada has no such recognized credentialing for midwifery or other support services. Only 40% are covered under single-payer or company plans or uncovered in some cases. That means unless the birthing person can pay out of pocket for midwifery services, 60% of the birthing population does not have access to one of the safest ways to birth their baby. Actually, in Nevada, 25% of birthing people do not receive prenatal care at all in the first trimester. 11% of children are born premature, and 9% are born with low birth weight at delivery. It may or may not surprise you that these numbers are all worse than the national average. The State Department of Health and Human Services has been working to increase these outcomes, and in 2020 had a goal to improve prenatal service for Medicaid-covered pregnancies by 10% and fell short of this goal. In 2020, 34,985 births occurred in Nevada. Of those, 19,696 were covered under Medicaid. The costs to the state of only the newborn care with low birth weight babies, preterm babies, and babies needing continued services was $51,668,621, an increase of $16,323,953 over the year. We know this is not a money committee, but I think it's important to see the cost to the state when discussing alternative proven birthing model access. In 2008, a 2018 study concluded that midwifery care in low-risk pregnancies reduced preterm birth and labor interventions. The study also cited that women in midwifery care were less likely to be Black, have Medicaid insurance, or have a history of pregnancy complications or previous cesarean births. Additionally, women in midwifery care were less likely to end up having a preterm or cesarean birth. All of these outcomes reduce cost of care, cesareans being one of the highest cost birthing scenarios available. Birthing people go through a physically trying period. Conceiving, growing, and birthing a child takes an incredible amount of work. I sometimes joke that my son tried to kill me because while pregnant with him, I was so sick, I don't remember a day during that pregnancy where I did not throw up. But it can also be incredibly rewarding or incredibly traumatic. I got to witness a traumatic birth firsthand in college. At 20 years old, I got to hold the hand of a friend. She was pregnant, covered under Medicaid. She obtained prenatal care from a physician who scheduled her birth. When I asked the mother about this, she didn't know that she could have a choice to go into labor naturally. The doctor induced labor by giving her Pitocin. There was no reason for the woman to go into labor on this day, besides that was the birthing model of her care provider. I would be lying if I said I remembered everything that happened that day, but I do remember that Pitocin was given multiple times. By the time contractions started, the mother had been in the hospital for over 24 hours, all at a cost to the state. When she went into labor, her doctor gave her an epidural, which then made her so numb, we had to tell her to push based on the readings of a monitor and a screen. The doctor used every intervention I can imagine at a cost to the state of what? The doctor there was no need for this level of intervention. The woman didn't know she had choices in these areas. One of the consistencies of this discussion, regardless of opposition or support, has been the idea of choice, that birthing people deserve choice in care and services obtained during pregnancy, birth, and beyond. The current single model of covered care does not work to allow for those choices to be made by all birthing people. One thing I think we can all understand is that the relationship between a person and their medical professional is sacred, and that regulation in that area should be deeply assessed to ensure the rights of the patient are retained while also supporting the highest possible standards of quality within the provider's field. I believe in the purpose of this bill, albeit the initial language did not get us there. We know this is part of the process, and we know that working together makes for better legislation. I am grateful for the feedback and community interest in this legislation, and I think we all want the same things: increased outcomes and increased choice. Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you, Assemblymember Peters. Dr. Koch, we have you next on our presenter list.
Hi, thank you. Hi, for the record, this is Dr. Sandra Koch, and I'm an obstetrician gynecologist. I've been practicing in Northern Nevada for over 30 years, and I'm here today to speak in support of AB 387. Although the American College of OBGYNs believes that hospitals and birth centers are the safest settings for birth, we recognize that each woman has the right to make a medically informed decision about where they deliver and who their provider is. AB 387 will allow licensure of qualified midwives in Nevada. Women who choose a licensed midwife to assist them with their birth will be assured that their midwife has met the requirements set forth in this bill and have agreed to practice in compliance with the restrictions listed. The bill will establish that women who do not meet the requirements for normal low-risk deliveries, pregnancies, will be informed of the increased risk associated with their diagnosis and will be referred for consultation or, when indicated, transferred for a higher level of care. It will ensure that the standard of care based on current science is consistent for women regardless of their chosen place of birth or their chosen provider. A working group that will form after the bill is signed into law will promote smooth transitions between levels of care. As Tiffany and Amanda referred to earlier, this is a critical point of contention and a place where we can significantly improve outcomes for home birth, people who choose to deliver out of hospital. In addition, the bill will require the collection of data for all planned out-of-hospital births by licensees. This will allow Nevada to evaluate the outcomes for women who do choose to deliver out of hospital. We, the Nevada State Medical Association and Nevada section of the American College of OBGYNs, believe that passing this bill will significantly improve the safety of out-of-hospital births in Nevada, and we strongly support passage. Thank you so much.
I apologize. Looks like I was still on mute. Thank you so much for your testimony, Dr. Koch. Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno.
Thank you, Chair Hadegay. And thank you to my co-presenters and everyone's patience in the long presentation, but it's a very important subject matter. As the bill came out, there were some things, we went through it line by line, word by word, and there were some items in the bill that were not necessarily the intent of the bill. But as I said in my introduction, we have diligently been working collectively with midwives across the state, the doctors, the hospital associations, and other legislators who actually took the time to read the entire bill when it came out in BDR form, 136 pages. And because of that, we have presented to this committee an amendment to make sure that the intent, the legislative intent of this bill, the language actually matches. So if you like, I can go through the amendment, and the midwife professionals and medical professionals that are on with me can answer any questions you might have of the changes. So in section 3.8, the word that is being deleted is birth assistant, and it's replaced with certified professional midwife birth assistant. Section 11.6, midwifery, is replaced with certified professional midwife. As in section 14.18, CPM, student midwife, section 15.21 was completely deleted by the amendment. Section 16.2 replaced language with APRM and a CNM or OB with experience working with home settings. There were also amendments made to 16.2D. And then the next section is 18.6, removing language, replacing it with CPM. Section 19.1, an applicant for a license for a midwife must submit to the division an application in the form prescribed by the division. The application must be accompanied by a fee in the amount prescribed by the regulation of the State Board of Health. And it goes on into the next page. Section 21 added language, which is the CPM in section 21.1, .2, and .3. Section 22.6 added certified professional midwife, and 22.6B, certified professional or certified nurse midwife. Section 22.63, a certified professional midwife. Section 23.6 also added conforming language as to 24.43. In 25.24, there was language that was replaced. The language in red was what's stricken out, and the language in green was what was added. Section 26.14 added the birthing center settings. 31.11 removed language, adding to the green language that you see on your amendment. At the bottom of that page is also section 69.20. A licensed certified professional midwifery was the wording added. In section 75.44, where it says any other type of midwife, that language was removed. In section 77.33, the language was added of CPM and certified professional midwife. In the final two sections, section 101.16 and 102.1 added language to the bill. If you have any questions as to why those changes were made, we are here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Assemblymember Monroe Moreno, for walking us through the amendment. Members, I will now go to questions. And before we go to questions, I would like to start off by handing it over to Speaker Frierson for a comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take a minute to thank Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno and Assemblywoman Peters and also Ms. Hoffman for what I believe is understated in how long this has been worked on. And I think we have been receiving emails suggesting that this is a regional issue or that there was some rush to some policy. I don't remember exactly when, but it was as recent as 2013 and possibly even 2011 when this first came up. And I remember distinctly there being concern about whether or not the community was ready. And there was a period of time where the midwifery community wanted to just be allowed to do what they do. And over the years, there was, I think, concern growing about mortality rates in childbirth and the impact that it had on communities of color. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew this was something that has been contemplated over several years, literally 8 to 10 years of discussions about if and when this was the right time. And so I'm glad to see us having this conversation and glad to see it being shepherded by both Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno and
Thank you, Speaker Frierson. Okay, with that, committee, any questions? I'm going to start with Assemblymember Hardy.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for this presentation. As in so many bill presentations, I definitely learned a lot about something that I knew very little. So I appreciate that. So just trying to sort this out, from how I understand this, there's a MEEK education and then there's a PEP. And a lot of midwives in our state currently have the PEP education, and then this bill would require the MEEK education. Do I have that right?
Correct.
Okay, so I tried to quickly write down, oh, is it okay for me to ask another question, Chair?
Yes, Assemblymember, please.
Okay. So I was trying to write down the requirements quickly. So there's, like a 3-year program, they have apprenticeships, a clinical requirement, they sit for credentialing. So I guess my question is, why would we be doing away with the PEP education and just having the MEEK, and does Nevada currently have the MEEK education?
Amanda McDonald for the record. So we kind of talked a little bit about that U.S. MARA task force that was put together, and they came together and said, well, how can we make a system where all these midwives are a little better integrated and a little bit more understood about where they're coming from? And they decided, you know what, if these midwives had a really standardized education, people might feel a little bit better about integrating them into their system. I know when I speak with doctors, sometimes they're really nervous. They have no idea what our level of education is because a lot of midwives go through that PEP process, and that PEP process is really individualized. And yes, going through PEP, you learn the same set of skills and you learn the same information that can get you to pass the exam. But making sure that everything is hit and all those sections have been covered thoroughly is not there. So you never really know exactly what is included in a PEP education because it's kind of like self-study, and there's a lot of information out there. And I know a lot of amazing PEP trained midwives for sure. But the idea of the MEEC accreditation program is that it's standardized. There's no questions about who got what and when and how. It's MEEC does this. They have to be accredited. They have to meet these standards. This is the education they get. This is the process they go through. This is the paperwork they do. So it's very standardized.
And it has been presented as a important and non-negotiable piece for collaboration and integration. So that, and as we see that improves outcomes. And so that's why it's important.
And could I have one more follow-up, or do you want to do another round? Or
You can go ahead, Assemblymember Hardy. We don't have to.
I'm sorry, Chair, this is Sarah Peters. I just wanted to add that this bill doesn't obligate every midwife to this education track. It's only for midwives who would obtain or choose to obtain that certification.
Okay, so that I think that kind of leads into my next question is, so then what happens to the people that currently have the PEP? And maybe you addressed this, but like I said, I was trying to write everything down.
Yeah. So those midwives who already have their CPM through that PEP process, requirements for licensure would be that midwifery bridge program that we talked about, that midwifery bridge certificate with the extra 50 CEUs. So they would have their CPM credentialing that happened through the North American Registry of Midwives based on their PEP education, passing their exam, getting through all the skills checks. Then they would get that midwifery bridge certificate, and then they would be eligible to apply for licensure here in Nevada. I know a lot of the CPMs who are PEP trained either have their midwifery bridge here already or they are working on it currently. So it's a matter of finishing that up. And by the time they do, chances are that's going to be when we're starting to do all this paperwork and get things going, hopefully. So it would not mean that they have to go back to school and get a PEP education. They can use exactly what they have now up until that cutoff point, which is in
2025. And we've put a piece in the bill that would allow individual extensions to that date for rural midwives and midwives who represent communities that have been historically marginalized. So we want to make sure that we create a more diverse midwifery workforce.
And Madam Chair, this is Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. That additional time would be on a case-by-case basis. And the board would be able to look at those on a case-by-case basis if they had to be extended. But there was a lot of conversation from some other midwives that there are not a large number of midwives from communities of color or in the rural communities, and they were finding it difficult to get the training. And that's why the extension was put in the amendment and giving the board that ability to do things on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Maybe I'll have some more later, get a chance. Thank you.
Next, we will go to Assemblymember Marzola.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you so much for the presentation and the bill. My question is, how long does it take to get certified, and how much is it to get certified?
So how long it takes really depends.
I'm sorry, if you guys would just identify yourselves for the record, just so our secretary can.
Sure, Amanda McDonald for the record. It takes varying amounts of time. So when it comes to a PEP education, typically those programs are considered 3 years for the didactic portion. They want a minimum of 2 years for the apprenticeship section of it. Those can happen concurrently. So you can do your 3 years of didactic study more quickly than that if you can. But generally, bare minimum is 2 years in this program. we often see CPMs taking much longer than that. It's really common because it depends on how many people are having babies out of the hospital in your community. What's your availability for preceptors? What's your family structure look like? Are you able to be a full-time student and attend 5 births a month? Can you only attend 2 births a month? So it really depends on how long it takes you to get those clinical skills really buttoned down and finish that didactic portion. If you're doing distance learning, some of those MEEC programs are distance learning. Those you can work around your schedule a little bit differently than I have to travel to my school. That's on a much more set schedule. So there's a lot of different factors in there. I can speak for MEEC education. Some of those programs are, I want to say the least expensive was probably, I want to say $9,000, and there are some well up into the tens and tens of thousands of dollars. So it really depends on the program. PEP process really is dependent on how you're going through things with your preceptors. Some preceptors charge a fee, some do not. Some student midwives are paid by their preceptor for attending births, some are not. There are scholarships available for MEEC programs and grants as well. I don't think there's any. Well, there might be some scholarship out there for PEP programs as well, but usually they're going towards the MEEC schooling. So it very much varies depending on your path and what you're doing.
Thank you so much for your answer. I appreciate it. Pretty amazing. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Assemblymember, for your questions. Next, we will go to Assemblymember Dickman.
Thank you so much, Chair. It kind of seems like we're placing some burdensome training requirements on birth assistants that actually only provide support during birthing, overseen by a qualified midwife. Should this bill pass the way it is, do you think that's going to place rural midwives at a severe disadvantage?
Tiffany Hoffman for the record. Honestly, the training for assistants is not extensive and it is not burdensome. And honestly, so when we attend births in the home setting, attending alone is not generally the safest way to attend a birth if there is a complication that arises during that birth. And so that assistant is there as a clinical assistant, and so that person will have to be responsible for clinical tasks. And sometimes that includes the resuscitation of a newborn. It might be giving medications for a hemorrhage that's occurring. It might be CPR to a mother or a birthing person. And so that person has to be well trained in some way, fashion, or form. So having someone who is untrained or just started attending births and has had zero training whatsoever, learning on the job in this case probably isn't the best way. Yes, you will learn as you attend births, but you need to have some basic foundational level of education or training before you start attending births in that assistant role.
Chair, do we have time for me to have a second question or no?
Yes, Assemblymember, go ahead.
Thank you so much. So, what is the restriction on someone who moves to Nevada as far as experience?
Tiffany Hoffman for the record. I believe you're referring to the reciprocity agreement.
Yeah.
It is currently listed as 5 years. We're open to changing that if necessary. That wasn't a piece that we were strongly tied to. So if that were something that seemed to be burdensome, we would be absolutely willing to change that.
I think that would be good because I think, the more we have available, the better it is.
Agreed.
So thank you. Appreciate the time. Thank you, Chair.
Chair Heidegge?
Yes.
Hi, this is Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. In response to Assemblywoman Dickman's question, I appreciate your comments. However, the training that a midwife would receive in another state, coming to our state, if she she or he wanted to be a midwife in this state and have a license, they would have to meet the standards of this state. So if their licensure in another state was less than Nevada, they would have to meet the standards of Nevada. Does that make sense?
Assemblywoman Dickman, for the record, yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. But could we speed it up if they do have the same or qualifications, rather?
And I believe the bill does address that. If they did have the same requirements, or even if the standards were higher than those in Nevada, then they would be eligible to apply for licensure in our state.
Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member. Next, we have questions from Assembly Member O'Neill.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may, I need one question to clarify, which may require a follow-up. So, and I think I need clarification. If a midwife currently has a PEB standing or training here in Nevada, to get that, I forget what, the MEA, the MAC, they still have to show and have someone monitor them during 5 births. Is that correct? Did I misunderstand that?
Are you asking about the amount of training that you would need to become a midwife going through a MEAC accredited school?
I guess so, yes. What I'm thinking about to lead forward is I'm looking at, say, a midwife. I don't even know, we have them out in the rural, such as Tonopah, who is PEB now and has been active for several years, qualified, I guess, under the PEB. To convert over, does she have to have you come monitor her or monitor her 5 deliveries?
So, Madam, for the record, sorry. So if it's someone who has been practicing and they are not a certified professional midwife right now, they could continue to practice just like they are right now and just not opt to get a license and continue exactly what they're doing right now, other than letting their client know that, hey, I don't have a license in this state. If it is a student who is working towards their CPM or is trying to become a certified professional midwife, they do need to be overseen by a preceptor who is a certified professional midwife. The number of births that they have to attend are, I think we're up to, I want to say 55 they have to attend overseen. Many attend more than that just because their apprenticeship may take longer. So it really depends on what route they're going. Are they going to remain unlicensed? If they plan to do that, there's no changes that they have to do. They don't have to be supervised. If they're a student planning on getting their CPM, they're going to need to be supervised.
And Tiffany Hoffman, for the record, if this is a CPM that would like to qualify for licensure in the state of Nevada, the bridge certificate, if they are currently a CPM, having gone through the PEP route, the only thing they would require is the bridge certificate, which is that 50 CEUs that they have 5 years to complete. I think it's 4 years right now with what we have in our bill. It would be available until 2025.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you, Chair, for allowing me the time. I'm still slightly confused. As Assemblywoman Hardy said, there's more information here than I ever thought I would know about midwives. And so I'm still trying to digest it. I appreciate the time, though.
Thank you, Assemblymember O'Neill, for your questions. Members, any other questions? Okay, I do have one, Assemblymember Monroe Moreno, for you or your presenters, and it's regarding the amendment. I noticed that you're completely deleting section 15, and I just kind of wanted you to walk us through what the intent was behind that. I know that section 15 is the section that kind of gave people the authorization to, if they didn't want to get the licensure, to just provide a document saying that they weren't licensed, and then also the requirement for them to keep the records. It was also it's a section that had the exemptions for other licenses, and then the gratuitous care of friends by members of family. So can you walk me through, or walk the committee through, what the intent was behind deleting section 15?
So I will start off. This is Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno, and I will throw it over to the midwives that are on the presentation. Doing meetings with other midwives in our state, it was brought to our attention that having that section kind of set them apart and had two classes of midwives. That the midwives who were not licensed were the only ones being obligated to have this form and save it for 5 years. We thought it would be better to treat everyone as equal, and so that everyone would have the form, letting their clients know what type of midwife there are that are available in the state, and not setting anyone aside. It would be all midwives would have the form, just an informed consent for their clients. And so that's why that section was taken out, just to make the bill more equitable, because we know not every midwife in the state wants to have a licensure. And we didn't want to impede upon that, but we want every birthing parent to know who they're hiring and what the scope of practice is of the person that they're hiring.
Okay, and that leads me to my second question. So then again, I mean, this is, if I read it correctly, this is completely optional. Certified midwife can choose to get the license or choose not to get the license.
Correct.
Okay, I see a hand up. Give me 1 second. Is Assemblymember Tolles?
Thank you, Chair, and I do appreciate that you asked that question about that section, because I too was wondering about that, and that's put on another question. So what is the key difference of benefit for those who are licensed versus those who are not? I know that's kind of the cusp of this whole bill, but is it that Medicaid or Medicare coverage, Medicaid coverage? Is it, if we could just sort of chart it out as just summarizing the overall presentation to make it clear in my head, that would be helpful.
I'm going to start. Okay. I'm going to start, and then I'm going to ask Tiffany and Amanda to take over. As I said in my opening statements, there were constituents in my district and other districts that came to me that had negative outcomes with their midwives that they had hired, thinking that the state of Nevada had a licensure. And when they found out that there wasn't, they asked, how can we set up that licensure? There's been some amazing outcomes with midwives. I'd say more than 90% of the births with midwives have wonderful outcomes. But you'll hear from some people who will be joining us in support and opposition of this bill. You'll hear stories of some of the negative outcomes. So the ask of me was, how can we provide that licensure? How can we establish regulations? And it's, you heard from Assemblywoman Peters. In utilizing her midwife, she wasn't able to use for insurance. Some people are, some are not. And the Medicaid savings that would come with the licensure of the midwife. But I will throw it over to the two midwives that are on.
Amanda McDonald for the record. So this is like the big part of the conversation that people go back and forth about, like, why on earth would you want to have licensure if you are living in a state and practicing in a state that does not require it? Why would you subject yourself to the state coming into your practice and telling you what to do? So there are two sides to this. And I'll kind of start from the unlicensed side. Midwives who choose not to be licensed don't have the state overseeing their rules. So they have full autonomy with their families and their clients to make those decisions that feel best for those families. And that may not be the same as the boundaries that other midwives might feel comfortable with. But they don't want to be restricted by the rules of licensure. So they will choose to remain unlicensed because they want that freedom. They value that freedom. It serves their communities best. And that's what they feel really comfortable doing. And those are the midwives that those families feel really comfortable hiring those midwives. On the licensure side, yes, there are restrictions that come with licensure. We know that to be the case. But there's also a lot of positives. Accountability, that's a huge one. So if a licensed midwife is practicing in a way that is negligent or unacceptable or needs to be adjusted, there's a process for that, and there's a way to work through those issues and get that sorted out. Collaboration is a huge piece. We talked about the safety issues, and one of the ways of making out-of-hospital births safer is by collaboration and integration. We have medical professionals who are really, really nervous about collaborating with out-of-hospital midwives because we are not licensed. I hear it over and over and over again. We don't know what kind of education you have. We don't know where your boundaries are. We don't know how you're practicing. We don't know what your charting looks like. So when you have something with some set standards, other professionals have an idea of, okay, this is what this group of midwives, this is the norm for them. This is what we can expect. Access is huge, right? We talked about the financial benefits. Being able to accept insurance from clients more easily is really, really helpful. I always get really excited when I find out that my families are able to fully utilize their health insurance benefits. I have pretty decent luck because I am licensed in the state of California, so that helps out a lot. In the state of California, I could actually accept Medi-Cal. I don't practice over there very often, so I haven't gone through the process because it would be expensive for me, and I don't have many Medi-Cal clients over on the California side. But you can't do that if you don't have a license, so that access for families. I don't know, you guys heard the birth center bill. If birth centers come about in this state, we will not be able to work in them unless we're licensed. And so that's an access issue for families. If there are birth centers who are run by certified professional midwives who are licensed in the state, that's access for families. Some families don't want to have babies in their home and they feel more comfortable in a birthing center setting. So that is huge. Referrals. This one is kind of like back and forth. While this licensure would not require that any provider collaborate with us, we cannot require that they do that. It might open the doors to, bridging that gap between, okay, I'll go ahead and see one of your clients. I've never done this before, and I'm a little bit nervous about it because this is very different. But now that we have some sort of guidelines and some sort of regulations, this relationship might be easier on both sides. So there's pluses to licensure. There's downsides to licensure. There may be some restrictions that people don't like to see, but those are things that the board would come up with. And being unlicensed is really similar to what's happening right now. So if someone is absolutely okay with the way that their practice is going right now, and the families are absolutely happy with the care they're receiving, they can continue to go down that unlicensed path.
Thank you so much. That was helpful.
Hey, members, I'm going to do one last call for questions before we open it up to testimony. Okay, just to give everyone listening over the internet the lay of the land of what testimony will look like, I will be taking 30 minutes of testimony in support, 30 minutes of testimony in opposition, and 30 minutes of testimony in neutral. I do have a couple of people who have signed up and are going to be testifying on video, so we will start with them and then move over to the telephone lines and then transition into the next part of the testimony. With that, I will be moving us into testimony and support. I know we have Ms. Danielle Yeager on with us on Zoom. If you'd like to just unmute yourself, Ms. Yeager, to give yourself the opportunity to give your testimony in support of the Assembly bill.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'm Danielle Yeager, for the record. And I'm a Nevada home birth loss mom, and I hired a CPM. We didn't know there was a difference between midwives education, which there's a lot of different types of midwives. You think they're all the same. They're not. We thought we actually hired a nurse midwife. As it turned out, we hired somebody who was actually criminally charged in California for practicing out without a license, where a baby almost died under her care. We didn't know any of this until after her son died. So she left California, which is a licensed state, came to Nevada where we have no regulations, and continued practicing. We tried to file a complaint. We contacted as many different boards in the state to let them know what happened, but there's nobody. There's no oversight here. We have nothing. And since there was nothing to do, there was no way to hold her accountable, to let anybody know what she had done. We couldn't make anything aware. We need to have something, some type of oversight, some type of board, some type of regulation put to keep them ethical, to keep them on par with what we have. This is care, and they need to be professional, ethical, responsible for the families in our communities. I support this much needed and long time coming bill to give education to midwives, to hold them accountable, to make midwives make sure they're getting the proper care, because you don't want them alone on the job, just like you wouldn't want somebody alone on the job that's learning and has no idea what's going on when this has to do with birth. We just don't know. They could misdiagnose. There could be a lot of things that could go wrong. So it's very important to have the proper training by the midwives that know what they're doing. I do agree with the past that the midwives working with the hospitals and the medical staff, that is very, very important for making assessments, for risking people out and transfers safer and easier. Because boy, do I wish that I had that, because my life would be completely different if we had the proper assessments by a doctor and a transfer plan that was actually put into motion. No one ever expects something to go wrong, but having the proper care with the teams ready and available, working together, makes all the difference between life and death. Choice means safety by giving better and improving care. Without the accountability, updating education, and bridge between out of hospital and hospital care, our state is lacking safety, care, and informed consent, which means there's really no real choices for women and their families. This does not mean that we're taking away rights or choices for our birth options, but making those choices better and safer for everyone that is choosing those different types of options out of a hospital. Our state has seen hard times, really, really hard times with COVID, and many families are looking to other birth options to keep their family safe from the virus. Creating regulations while building a more open relationship between out of hospital and hospital care, especially during this time and for the upcoming future, is how we keep families safe. It is our right as Nevada citizens to be given better and safer choices. That means bumping up our out-of-hospital providers with the necessary regulations and to get a proper level of care for everyone. I cannot stress this enough because I obviously didn't know. So I really just want everyone to know that the regulation is so important in updating their care, education. It may seem like it's a little bit here and there, and it might seem like a lot, but that education does matter to the families. It really, really, truly matters, because if they don't have the proper education, they miss red flags that could be sending to the hospital that could literally save their child or themselves. So that's all I have to say. And thank you for listening, and thank you for having this board and all this stuff. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Yeager. Broadcasting, if we could go to the telephone lines and take the next caller in support.
Yes, Chair. To testify in support on AB 387, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, to testify in support on AB 387, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 039, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and maybe.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
My name is Erica Miniberry, and I am testifying in support of AB 387 because in 2013, I had a home birth that ended in a hospital transfer that ended in a cesarean section. My midwives took incredible care of me and exercised the utmost in safety, including my mental health. I had a beautiful healing birth despite the C-section because of this. If my midwives had put their own biases and agenda before the safety of my baby and myself, I would not have had the same outcome. You're about to hear a bunch of testimonies in opposition to this bill from birth workers who do just that, put their own self-interest before the safety of their client. In the name of maintaining freedom, Outside of the fact that this bill does not impact the freedom of anyone, I do wonder if these opposers consider the freedom of the Black parents and babies who are dying at up to 6 times the rate of their white counterparts. One has to ask what type of practitioner opposes things like anti-racist and anti-bias training for those that are serving marginalized communities. What type of practitioner is against informed consent? It is not just insulting that these conspiracy theorists may say government regulation to this governmental body, but the falsities of their claims are dangerous to Nevadans who are the most vulnerable. For these reasons, I ask this committee to please vote yes on 387. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Miniberry, for sharing your story. We appreciate it. Thank you. Broadcasting, next caller.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 545. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, members of the committee, and thank you for your time. My name is Riley Sutton. That's RILEYSUTTON, and I'm speaking in support of AB 387, speaking as an individual. And I just want to tell you a quick story about why I support this bill. I called 911 on February 17th, just after 3 a.m. My third child had been born at home and was born virtually lifeless. After a minute or two of CPR and oxygen, which felt like an eternity, the baby was still unresponsive, and the midwives instructed me to call the ambulance. This was a very different birth than the first 2 births of my other children. Our first one was born in the hospital, and the birth was fine, but the afterwards, or the constant check-ins and monitoring, the trash collection, and the kind of general hubbub of the hospital, we found it impossible to rest. So we had a we had a home birth for our second child, and that home birth went just fine. And afterwards, it was lovely to be home, our own bed, our own food, the family around it. It was just great. So our third baby, Aaron, not to bury this too far down, he is now happy, he's healthy, he's just an impossibly naughty and willful little 1-year-old. The issues that he faced at birth were a total statistical aberration, and nothing to do with our midwives. And we feel like home birth families in the future should know that. Or on the flip side, they should know if there was an issue that was the fault of or the negligence of the midwives. With common sense regulations and reporting, standards of education and certification, more families in the future can feel comfortable to have the kind of lovely experience we had, at least with our second child. Licensure and mechanisms for correcting issues or revoking the license are much needed to ensure safety and transparency. Our midwives, Ms. Hoffman and Ms. McDonald, who you've been hearing from this evening, kept Aaron alive. They were professional, they were quick, they were 100% on top of it. Yet when the first responders arrived, they did not take Ms. Hoffman and Ms. McDonald seriously. Minutes were wasted, felt like, again, hours in redoing vitals and other checks. This is not at all a knock on first responders. I want to be very clear about that. They just didn't know what the level of training and expertise, certification, they didn't know what they were walking into. And this is the other main reason that I support this bill, that the provisions that would recognize this as a profession and create a system for working with to make sure the first responders know when they're dealing with trained professionals and able to administer life-saving care much more quickly. Again, thank you for letting me speak, and I urge your support for AB 387, and I'd, of course, be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Sutton. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 261. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi there. My name is Mary Gilbert, MaryGilbert, and I am a midwifery student here in Reno, Nevada. I know you may hear a lot of folks who are opposed to this bill, and they are typically much louder than those in support. I would like to acknowledge that many of the people who are in support of this bill may not be here because, like myself, they are tirelessly working to serve their communities, and so I will speak on behalf of myself and them. I've been attending birth since 2008, and when I first began my journey into midwifery, I was much like these folks who are opposed to this bill. I believe that to put regulations on midwifery was almost sacrilegious. I believe this work was beautiful, wonderful, safe, and full of magic. I still believe this work is magical. don't get me wrong. But now that I've done this work for over a decade, I realize how important this bill is. As a midwifery student in my first year of attending a birth as an apprentice, I went to a birth where the primary midwife wasn't there when I showed up. In fact, she was over an hour away and the client was pushing. I caught the baby by myself, and when the mother hemorrhaged, the midwife instructed me to inject Pitocin in a manner that has not been practiced since the 70s. I needed my primary midwife there. This client needed the primary midwife there. The client deserved better. A licensed midwife should be at all appointments, labors, and births. A student should never have to experience this alone until they're ready and properly educated. And this outdated advice the midwife gave me should have been brought to attention at a peer review so others could educate her on new evidence-based practice. As a midwifery student, I have also witnessed the disconnect between midwives and hospital staff. I can't express how important it is for me to have the opportunity to create and cultivate relationships with doctors, specialists, and hospitals to help keep birthing people and babies safe. And on the topic of keeping birthing people and babies safe, as a student, I also want to be able to have access to life-saving medications and other equipment at births that I attend. These life-saving medications helped me during the birth of my children while I was hemorrhaging. My first child was born in a hospital. My second was born at home.
We still have quite a bit of members. We need people on the line. We need to get to testimony. So if you could just send the rest of your testimony into our committee manager, she'll make sure to include it in the record. Thank you for your testimony. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 705. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
My apologies to the chair. I was a little fast on the gun. I am here for opposition.
Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 526. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
For the record, I am Dr. Keith Brill, Keithbrill, President of the Nevada State Medical Association and past chair of Nevada's section of ACOG. I have also submitted separate written testimony. I began practicing in Nevada in 1999 on the labor floor at Nellis Air Force Base. Our 4 OBGYN physicians worked collaboratively with 2 certified nurse midwives and truly enjoyed our working relationship, sharing low-risk and high-risk patients at a safe and effective environment, and I learned a great deal from these midwives. When I entered private practice in Las Vegas in 2003, I immediately began seeing home midwife delivery patients transferred to hospitals, typically when complications from childbirth had already occurred. Through my national involvement with ACOG, I have watched other states research the need for proper education and licensure of home midwives. The professional degree of CPM became a standard term in the midwife field. There had to be a way for apprenticeship-trained and direct entry midwives who did not go through master's or nursing master's degree training to continue to practice as midwives. This was thoroughly reviewed in the CPM PowerPoint presentation we just heard. We have always known that midwives have been performing home births. The standards endorsed for licensure allow these midwives to meet the international standards we've heard described through the ICM and MEEC and through all of your questions during the question session. It's time for Nevada to uphold the standards for midwifery care expected by women in other nations and around the world. You will hear opposing views that giving birth is a natural physiological process that has been attended to for centuries by midwives. And I agree that birth is a natural physiological process. But you know what else is? Well, I'll start with this one, digestion, because I know I'm hungry right now, and I'm sure many of you are skipping meals right here tonight. And when natural physiological processes go wrong or cause disease, our public relies on trained and licensed gastroenterology specialists to care for them. Another example, the beating of our hearts and the circulatory system. Yet when our leading causes of death in America, cardiovascular disease and strokes occur, we rely on licensed cardiology and emergency specialists. I can go on and on. If you break a bone or your child breaks a bone, I think you want a licensed orthopedic surgeon taking care of your child. I use these examples to give some perspective and to remind the committee members that all births are not the same, and even low-risk out-of-hospital births can quickly become high-risk or develop complications that require immediate attention. I'm fully aware of the current home birth climate in our states. I'm also aware of the pitfalls in the current system, of what can and has gone wrong.
Dr. Brill, thank you so much for your
time.
testimony. We appreciate it, and we appreciate you sending in your written remarks. Thank you. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 719. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and maybe.
Hello, for the record, my name is Kathy Buchanan, Buchanan, Kathy with a K and a Y. I'm going to try to do this as fast as possible, allow you guys to get to know me. I'm a veteran of the U.S. Army, 1st Cav Brigade Level Combined Arms. One of my roles was actually auditing software at NASA at their Alabama location. I'm a former unit clerk for intensive care nursery. I have an associate's degree in science healthcare management, science for healthcare management, and I'm a former medical biller and coder. I have 3 biological children. And the first one was born with van der Waals syndrome. I attended OBGYN. As stated, nothing was wrong. Didn't know she had van der Waals syndrome and had been born without a soft palate until she was 3 months old, and I was administering CPR in my living room. My second was a very traumatic C-section. He was born 6 weeks preemie. And following that, I joined the United States Army, got a healthy dose of PTSD due to a military sexual trauma, and then met Tiffany Hoffman when I was pregnant at the age of 36 with my third born. It's my first time I've breastfed. It's my first time I've been with a midwife. And I know why they say time with a patient builds a different level of relationship, and it allows you to practice skills. I want to call your attention to the American SPCC that says that the highest rate of child abuse under federal guidelines is under age 1 is 25.7%, and an annual estimate of 1,840 children die from abuse and neglect, and that was as of 2019. Then I will draw your attention to childwelfare.gov and their public health approach. A number of experts have championed a public health approach to addressing child maltreatment fatalities, which focuses on improving health and well-being of individuals and communities before child maltreatment happens. A public health approach involves defining the problem, identifying the risks and protective factors, understanding consequences, and developing prevention strategies. Additionally, a public health approach engages the entire community in preventing child maltreatment and ensuring that parents have the support and services they need before abuse or neglect could occur. In addition to those statements, I'd like to say that during a national pandemic, the availability of care is...
Caller. Thank you. We appreciate you testifying today. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 614. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi there. My name is Zach Chattel, ZACKCHATELLE. Thanks for having me. I'll try to be brief. I'm a working firefighter paramedic in the Washoe County community. My wife and I had our first 3 months ago and decided we wanted to do, with the overall COVID environment and everything else, we wanted to do a home birth with a midwife. We had 2 certified midwives, one being the main, and our experience was amazing. It didn't go to plan. We ended up having to go to the hospital later in the pushing phase of labor, which was the call of our midwife, which was greatly appreciated because of the work that our midwife had done in building a network and a relationship with the hospitals. She was able to advocate for us before we ever got there. All our information, our needs were there. They knew that we were going for a natural style birth, and so that was kept in mind. We had an overall great experience. As a paramedic, accreditation to me just means continuity of care for our patients, and that should be every clinician at any level's goal. We want the best outcome for our patients, and when we all have a uniform standard of care, we all can rely on each other. And one of the people talked earlier and said that, we can assume our job and take action sooner when we don't have to refollow steps that have already been taken. And kind of my ending point is just that hospitals are, for everything else, they're used for emergent situations, and labor is not an emergent situation in and of itself, but it can become one. And because of that, accreditation, again, should allow and will allow midwives to have access to medications such as TXA for postpartum hemorrhage and mag sulfate for eclamptic seizures, which are widely accepted in my field already, both out of hospital and in hospital, as life-saving and good medication and good practice. So I think everything about this bill is a good thing and should be a yes for everyone hearing it tonight. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chattel, for your testimony. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 373. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes. Caller with the last 3 digits of 373. Please press *6 to unmute.
Hi, my name is Mandy Bengtson, MandyBengtson. I'm a former patient of Tiffany Hoffman and Amanda McDonald. I'm really grateful for the level of care but Amanda and Tiffany provided when my daughter was born in June 2020. My daughter was in a position during labor that required the help of a vacuum assist, and it was really because of Tiffany and Amanda's excellent medical training and experience that they strongly encouraged me to transfer to the hospital when I did. And that timely transfer allowed me to successfully deliver a healthy baby girl vaginally without medication or other complications. And while it was not the birth I had planned, I felt incredibly empowered by my birth experience because of their care and the support of my partner, my doula, and the exceptional hospital staff that accepted me at the hospital. So even though I didn't deliver it at home, I would have absolutely still chosen to try for a home birth, and there are several reasons. First, I was able to work through the toughest parts of my labor at home where I felt most comfortable. The hospital staff had a strong relationship with my midwives and were kind and encouraging to me upon arrival. I received amazing prenatal care, with each of my prenatal visits with Tiffany being 60 minutes long, and she ensured that I was as healthy and felt as supported as possible. And then after my daughter was born, Tiffany made 5 one-hour postpartum visits to our home within the first 6 weeks to ensure my daughter and I were healthy and that we were adjusting to our new family life. So this is not the standard of care most birthing people receive, but it should be available to anyone regardless of a person's financial resources. I strongly support AB 387 because it would greatly expand the availability of safe out-of-hospital births in our state and would ensure the safety of birthing people and their babies. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your testimony, Dr. Bingston. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 477. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes. And maybe.
Good evening. My name is Kendria, Kendrea Dickens. I'm a board-certified obstetrician gynecologist in Las Vegas. Been practicing in Nevada since 2004. I started out originally in a rural city known as Mesquite, Nevada. I practice currently as an obstetric laborist, which is a physician, an OBGYN board certified who practices solely in the hospital. We provide care for emergencies and patients that present to the hospital who may or may not have a physician that's taking care of them. My team of laborists and I have been directly affected by unregulated practice of some midwives in the state of Nevada. I want to go on the record to say there are lots of great midwives. I trained with midwives. And there are midwives who have a level of care and they know when it's time to refer. But unfortunately, there's a large degree of outliers out there. We've taken care of many women who've had conditions and risk factors which would not at all be ideal for home birth. This will include women attempting breech deliveries at home, trials of labor after cesarean sections, coming in with ruptured uteruses, home deliveries of women with complex medical conditions, of which my team in the last month have witnessed 2 babies that have been dead as a result of, attempted home births with conditions that were really high risk. For the record, I'm truly an advocate for women and believe that women have the right to choose their birth experience. I do believe that they also need to be very aware of the education, training, experience, and any past disciplinary actions taken against any provider. Unfortunately, in our state, midwifery has not been pretty much regulated in that same way. They have not been held to the same types of standards and accountability. For this reason, I'm in full support of AB 387. I believe that it will outline common, moderate, and high-risk obstetric situations, which should definitely be, patients should be counseled better that they may not be great candidates for home deliveries. I think it's also going to develop a professional board for the midwives to develop standardized criteria for education, outline a path to licensure, and provide oversight and disciplinary action when needed. I think it's also going to require some full disclosure to make the public clear on the differences between the different midwives. I also think that this is going to help to bridge the gap between OBGYNs and midwives. I don't think there's one that's better than the other necessarily. I think it's a matter of selection of patients. I think that that's where we're falling short, and then the regulations. I think it's very important that we're collaborative because in times of need, we definitely are where the patients are presented.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 477, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and maybe more.
Hi, Stacy McHale, S-T-A-C-I, McHale, M-C-H-A-L-E. I am speaking on behalf of myself. I am also the current president-elect of the Clark County Medical Society. I am a Nevada licensed and board-certified OBGYN physician in Clark County, and I have lived in Las Vegas for 13 years. I've actively provided obstetric care to the women of Nevada for those 13 years. Prior to moving to Nevada, I had the opportunity to learn from many different birth providers. In Pennsylvania, during my residency training, I was taught primarily by obstetric physicians, but I was also fortunate to have been taught by certified nurse midwives who delivered both in a licensed freestanding birth center as well as in our hospital. I am a better obstetrician because of the lessons I learned from these amazing women. I learned the importance of provider education and collaboration and allowing for safe birth experiences. The Pennsylvania community had direct entry and certified professional midwives as well. And these birth providers all had physicians that they could consult with and refer patients to as needed. I learned that the best birth providers were not those who were cavalier and could, quote, handle everything, but instead those who recognized their limitations and were willing to ask for collaboration and assistance when this was warranted. From these amazing midwives, as well as all of the OBGYN physicians who nurtured and taught me during my 4 years in Pennsylvania, I became the obstetrician I am today. When I moved to Nevada, I learned quickly that this was not the case and that there was a division between the midwifery community and the community of OBGYNs. This is something that I believe needs to be repaired. I support safe birth options for women in Nevada, and I am in support of licensure and educational requirements for all providers of birth in Nevada, including physicians, certified nurse midwives, certified professional midwives, and direct entry midwives. The safety of mothers and babies in Nevada is of the utmost importance, and I support legislation that allows birth to be a safer experience. It is my hope that passage of AB 387, along with prior past legislation that allowed for the development of the Maternal Mortality Review Committee, will continue to improve the safety of women who give birth in Nevada and continue to improve the quality of healthcare in our state.
Thank you for your testimony, Dr. McHale. For those listening over the internet, we have time for one more caller in support, and then we will move into opposition. If you've been waiting on the line, thank you so much for your patience and for calling in to provide your testimony, but unfortunately, we will not have time to hear everyone's testimony who's on the line, so I would encourage you to please have your remarks sent over and emailed over to the committee manager. You can reach the committee manager and email your remarks in support to ASMCL, that's ASMCL at asm.state.nv.us. Thank you. Broadcasting, can we take the next caller, please?
Caller with the last 3 digits of 475, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and maybe. Caller with the last three digits of 475, please press star 6 to unmute.
Hi, my name is Alicia Sowers, ALICIASOWERS, and I am a home birth loss mom. I delivered twins, Momo twins, at home on May 7th, 2020, and we lost our firstborn son, Sullivan. Many of the aspects of this bill would have made a difference in our situation, requiring more training, having an organized body of oversight recording the actions of midwives, and not allowing student midwives to conduct care unsupervised are all pieces that will make safer changes for Nevada families. A researchable record of our midwives' past would have been something that would have been hugely useful to us and would have perhaps saved our son's life. Clear standards and requirements for care would have changed our lives. And not allowing student midwives to care on their own unsupervised. We were left for several hours while I was in labor with just the student midwife before our midwife came to attend. And during that time, a student midwife told us that just recently, at that point, she had gone to another birth that she attended for her midwife who didn't show up and she missed it. And the student midwife did the entire birth on her own. I support this legislation and I urge you to pass it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story with us, Ms. Sowers. Okay, at this time, we are going to move into testimony and opposition. Before we go to those on the telephone line, we are going to take one of the testifiers who's going to be testifying on video. I believe we have Ms. Ellison Junson here with us to provide testimony and opposition. Ms. Ellison Janu Butler, and you're ready?
Yes, ready. Thank you so much. Good evening, Committee on Commerce and Labor. For the record, my name is Allison Juno Butler, and I'm a Nevada-based certified professional midwife and licensed midwife, licensed in Arizona, and speaking on behalf of the Nevada Midwives Association in opposition to AB 387 as it was posted to the legislative site. NMA consists of around 40 midwives across the state, including certified professional midwives, traditional midwives, and community midwives who are deeply committed to providing the highest quality midwifery services. As a small business owner, I have served families in the Las Vegas and Henderson area, and also from Tonopah to Kingman, Pahrump to Moapa, with evidence-based reproductive healthcare services. Of approximately 30 midwives serving in Southern Nevada, I am the only certified professional midwife who has graduated from a Midwifery Education Accreditation Council MEAC-approved program, and thus I am the only midwife who currently meets all of the requirements that this Assembly bill wants to put in place for the future. Since this bill eliminates the primary way CPMs have received their education and board certification in Nevada. This represents a huge access and equity issue for Nevada's midwives who have overwhelmingly accessed workforce training, apprenticeship, and PEP pathways to becoming midwives. AB 387 does not negate or alleviate even one of these steep barriers for Nevada midwives, since there are no MEAC-accredited midwifery schools in Nevada. Not all individuals are able to afford MEAC tuition or access federal student aid funding. Only 5 of the 11 MEAC schools accept federal student funding. Students may not be able to relocate out of state to attend the 8 MEAC schools that only provide in-person education. And not everyone is able to access online education due to rural internet issues or because of lack of good fit to online learning models, as we've seen throughout the pandemic. Despite my passion for the MEAC pathway to midwifery education, I recognize that these challenges may be even greater barriers for already underrepresented individuals in midwifery and higher education, including Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. Speaking personally, while I am broadly in support of a pathway to licensure in Nevada for CPMs, and am extremely proud of my MEAC education, I stand in opposition to this Assembly bill in solidarity with my Nevada Midwives Association colleagues who are experienced traditional midwives and certified professional midwives who went through the NARM PEP process to become national board certified midwives. I am someone who significantly values the wonderful relationships that I have with physicians, nurses, hospitals, and other allied health professionals in Southern Nevada. I can also speak from my personal experience as an Arizona licensed midwife that despite regulation, licensure, and parameters meant to enhance midwifery integration into the Arizona healthcare system, that licensure has not in any way integrated midwives with physicians, hospitals, and allied health professionals who have refused to collaborate with licensed midwives such as myself, despite standardized licensing requirements. Shifting to statements from the Nevada Midwives Association, NMA opposes AB 387 as it was posted on the legislative site. While NMA has a variety of concerns about AB 387, as it relates to commerce and labor, NMA is primarily concerned that AB 387 would cause the elimination of an established workforce through the restraint of trade. Additionally, we are also concerned with the bill's disregard for acceptability and equity in the pathway to licensure and training, along with AB 387 requirements that extend outside of licensed CPMs to other direct entry midwives to meet requirements that they and their clients are not in support of. Restraint of trade is the action that interferes with free competition in the market. AB 387 restricts the trade of long-established small businesses operating in the state of Nevada, which includes historically women-owned businesses. We cannot ignore that historically and currently midwifery licensure and regulation that has made becoming a midwife extremely difficult or prohibitive has been a tool of oppression, control, racism, and marginalization. It has been used to disenfranchise already historically marginalized communities from receiving culturally competent and representative midwifery care by and from the midwives of these communities. Our national and state maternal, parental, and newborn mortality and morbidity numbers show the outcomes of this approach. My midwifery colleagues and over 1,100 families they serve have voiced via NELIS that this assembly bill will only repeat what has happened in other states historically, which is to increase healthcare inequities in a variety of sections of the bill and decrease access to midwifery education, especially for midwives who are historically marginalized and underrepresented in health professions, including but not limited to women, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, immigrants, LGBTQIA folks, single parents, low-income individuals, rural residents, and others. To close, we cannot support a bill that will decrease the midwifery labor workforce in Nevada, negatively impact future workforce development, detract from Nevada's historical support of apprenticeship trades, negatively impact primarily women-owned businesses, have negative financial impacts on the economy, and cause the domino effect of restricting the choices of women and birthing people in Nevada. Midwives make a difference, and Nevada's parents, babies, families, and communities are counting on their current and future midwives. We need more midwives, not fewer. Thank you so much for the honor of speaking with you.
Thank you, Ms. Butler. I wanted to leave a couple of minutes to see if anyone in the committee had questions for you. Committee members, any questions for Ms. Juno Butler? Oh, Assemblymember Dickman.
Thank you so much. My question would just be, so if this bill is optional, licensing and registration are optional, how would this be harmful to you and to the current system?
Currently, we have the majority, except for 3 midwives in the state who have become CPMs, have gone through the PEP process. So that represents a historical and current access issue to MIC education. So while there is a pathway to becoming bridged to be able to be licensed for those who have previously done PEP education, what that tells us is that this bill is doing nothing to eliminate the barriers that have prevented these individuals from going through a MIC education pathway in the future. This means that our midwifery workforce is not going to continue to be replenished. We need more midwives, not fewer. And if the vast majority, over 90% of midwives who've become a CPM through the PEP process, then that tells us that there are issues here that are way broader than AB 387 allows to address. And so we cannot ignore the future impacts of that on this through this bill.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the response. And thank you, Chair.
Members? Okay, thank you so much, Ms. Juno Butler, for your testimony. Broadcasting, we can go ahead and move to the telephone line, please.
To testify in opposition on AB 387, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 900, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. My name is Justin Watkins, Watkins. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I would like to start off by commending the bill sponsor and the presenters today. I thought it was a very organized and well put together presentation, one of the best I've ever seen. And I want to support the bill, but it falls short in one major component, and that is the stated goal of accountability. I've had the unfortunate circumstances of representing clients who have had babies die as a result of midwife negligence. And the accountability that would be created under this bill currently would result in licensure being revoked or some sort of administrative effort, but that does not fully make good on accountability, because there's a second prong, which is to ensure that the person who has been harmed is made whole. Here, the bill would provide for protection under the medical malpractice economic damages cap, which means that if a baby was killed or a mother was harmed as a result of negligence of a midwife, a licensed midwife, the maximum compensation that anybody could ever receive other than medical expenses is $350,000. On the flip side, there is no requirement for any licensure bond or insurance limits. And while we do not have anything in statute that requires that of doctors that practice in hospitals, the hospitals themselves are going to require that of any doctor who has administration rights in the hospital. So insurance coverage is not a problem. In the cases that I've represented my client, none of the midwives have had any insurance coverage, and therefore there is limited, if any, ability to make my client whole financially or otherwise. And for those reasons, we oppose this bill. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Watkins. Nice to have you back with us. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 755. Please state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, committee. I am Marlene Lockhart, representing the Nevada Association of Midwives, and I am calling in opposition to this measure reluctantly, because the Nevada Association of Professional Midwives has a bill on the Senate side, SB 271, which we feel more comprehensively addresses the goal of licensure of CPMs and accomplishes that without undue burden to some of our most vulnerable rural and minority midwives who would like a path to licensure. We have offered an amendment to AB 387. Last I checked, it was not posted online as of the time of this hearing. But our amendment allows for more educational pathways, which opens the opportunity for licensure among minorities and those from rural Nevada. Applications must have successful completion of an educational program or pathway accredited by the Midwifery Education Accredited Council, MEAC, which you've heard a lot about tonight, or successful completion of the Midwifery Bridge Certificate. The North American Registry of Midwives has recommended that the PEB process continue to be accepted. And we feel that this bill would prevent current PEB students from getting licensure and prevent those working on the Midwifery Bridge Certificate from obtaining licensure because of the limited time allotment. This requirement is more restrictive and disproportionately prevents those from rural Nevada and minorities from being able to obtain a licensure. We are still hopeful.
Thank you for your testimony. I do, we do have to take other callers in opposition, and we are on a time limit, but I did have a question for you. Did you work with the bill sponsor throughout the process, and did the bill sponsor address any of your concerns through her amendment?
Yes, we did, absolutely. We have been holding stakeholder meetings all summer long and last fall, and Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno participated in a number of those stakeholder meetings. We have sent our amendment to Assemblyman Monroe Moreno, and we had a discussion as late as today about the amendment. So we continue to be hopeful that on the narrow issues that I think remain to be resolved, that they can be resolved. We are hopeful that they be resolved.
Well, we would encourage you to continue working with the sponsor, and I would like to remind everyone that we have strict committee rules that require all amendments and exhibits to be in by 12 p.m. the day before the meeting. If you do not make that timeline, your material has the possibility of not making it onto Nellis on time. So thank you. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 594, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Danielle Gallant, and thank you for taking the time to listen to my testimony. I know it's late for you all. I've had 2 home births, one in California and one in Las Vegas. The California birth was overseen by a NEEC midwife, and the Las Vegas home birth was overseen by a PEP midwife. When my husband and I decided to have a home birth in California, it was partly because as self-employed persons, we could not afford a hospital birth, as living in the Bay Area was beyond expensive. We made a decision really based on economics. I handled labor better than most, and it was a good experience. So we wanted to have the same experience in Nevada with our second child. Both births were amazing, but I will say my Las Vegas birth was emotionally a more positive and more welcoming experience. My midwife, Sherry Hopkins, doula, and my husband and our oldest son welcomed our little one into the world. I can't explain it in tangible terms, but I can tell you that it just felt better. I'm all for licensing for midwifery in the state of Nevada, but this bill only allows one type of education from one organization, MICA. That's like only allowing CPAs or doctors or attorneys from Harvard. That does not open up options for women, but rather drastically limits it. MICA is not available in Nevada, and it's expensive. It would make midwifery in Nevada that is only for the elite. I'm interested in a thoughtful, inclusive bill to provide licensing that will give Nevadans a safe home birth, but also options and accessibility for women who want home births or cannot afford a hospital birth. Allowing other educations outside of MICA will allow for more qualified midwives in Nevada and will allow them to have that same experience that I've been lucky to have. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Ms. Gallant. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 170, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes, maybe.
Hi, my name is Elisa Wall, ELISSAWAHL. So I'm just a freedom-loving mom who has a lot of friends that are midwives and was interested in a home birth myself. And the way I see it, you are dealing with philosophical differences. People who see birth as either medical or natural. You can legislate birth to be more and more medical, but then what happens to the parents who don't hold that same philosophy? Parents who see birth as more natural. The fear and anger that you may have seen in emails or may hear in testimony is really about the lack of clarity in the intent that there will still be non-CPM midwives, not just unlicensed midwives, but non-CPM midwives. Without acknowledging this, there is a very real possibility that the new regulatory board could make regulations, which is their job, about other types of midwives. This will drive midwives, other types of midwives underground. that community feels that the authors wanted would not happen. There will be more unassisted births and more division. So please be careful not to legislate out a legal option or to allow this new regulatory board to legislate out legal options. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony and your brevity. We appreciate it. Broadcasting, next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 475, please solely state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes, maybe.
Hi, it's Jessica Lagor, Lagor. I'm a midwife and home birthing mother in Las Vegas. This bill removes my choice of birth attendants because all of my 4 previous perfectly normal births would be considered illegal under this bill. Ironically, I am currently over 43 weeks pregnant, which makes me taboo to attend under this bill, but I still believe in autonomy. OBGYNs who are responsible for fetal demise continue practicing despite their licensure requirements. As it stands, Nevada is one of the very few states left with complete freedom of birth choices and parental rights in childbirth. Women and their families travel from surrounding states to have their babies with Nevada midwives, including CPMs, because we are free to support them in their completely autonomous choices. Currently, personal responsibility is still a thing in Nevada, but if you allow this bill to pass, we will not be able to say that anymore. Additionally, the families that I serve do not want to sign informed consent or refusal forms because their choices do not come with fine print. This bill would make Nevada no better than the other surrounding tyrannical states, which would force these families into choices that are not theirs. They have mentioned that this is still an option to hire an unlicensed midwife. However, there are not many of us who do not desire licensure, and we cannot absorb the volume of women who will not qualify for birth with the licensed CPM under this bill. The women will choose to have their babies completely alone in order to avoid unnecessary interventions or arbitrary rules that they don't agree with, and that's their right. This bill was written by 2 midwives. However, the Nevada Midwives Association has tracked down over 40 midwives who are opposed to this bill. As an industry, we do not approve of 2 people making decisions that affect everybody. There are many reasons for that, which you will find in your email boxes. Please read those. You will also notice that there are over 1,100 votes in opposition to this bill on the polls on the Nevada Legislature website because the families do not consent to this bill. This bill removes many of our currently valid and perfectly acceptable paths to midwifery, including placing restrictions on the time-honored art of apprenticeship. The bill writers and bill sponsors have consistently been closed to communication. They've been stubborn about their wording despite the amendments offered and have been non-responsive to requests for meetings, including one of the 3 members of an ACPM in the Nevada chapter who was denied access to stakeholder meetings when this bill was being written.
Ms. Mooney, we are going to have to move on to the next caller. Thank you. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 452, please solely state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening. My name is Colleen Oland. That is Colleen Ohlandt. I'm a mother of 4 children, all born in the state of Nevada. I've had 2 doctor-directed hospital births and 2 midwife-assisted home births. I am strongly against Assembly Bill 387. This proposed act of establishing a board of licensed, certified professional midwives and the included exemptions, provisions, and requirements is burdensome, overreaching, and unnecessary. I believe it will just be the beginning of marginalizing and one day outlawing my current freedom to home birth with an unlicensed midwife here in Nevada. I know that all guarantees, accountability, or better outcomes are only provisions to compensate financially when something goes wrong or breaks. Therefore, I have never held the false belief that doctors-directed birth are safer, nor even that midwife-assisted birth was less harmful. In each choice in birthing options, I made the best informed decision I could for my family, my baby, and myself, fully understanding the best outcomes are not always achieved despite licensure, accredited doctors, nor word-of-mouth unlicensed midwives. The cost financially to my family for my midwife-assisted birth was less than $5,000 combined, while the burdens placed on my family to have 2 doctor-assisted births was upwards of 25,000, and these were healthy births. With the regulated, licensed, insured doctor-directed births, less time was given in care, and they cost not only more in money, but also they cost more in the physical harm that was done to my body due to protocols required and those directed by my doctors, as my parenthood began at the age of 34 and ended just shy of my 41st birthday, thus designating each child an at-risk pregnancy. Finally, my fourth home birth could not have happened in the manner it did within a hospital due to the restrictive protocols. My last child was a child with Down syndrome. I was told by the perinatal expert that my daughter would not live long within my womb, and he was wrong. She lived until just before our scheduled cesarean with that same doctor. Yet, with the help of my midwife, Palm Mortuary, the coroner's office, and other doctors, I was able to have an amazing, healthy, and emotionally healthy home birth that deeply facilitated our family's healthy mourning of our child. I enjoyed the freedom to choose the best options for my family.
Next caller. Thank you. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 705. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening. My name is Jolina Simpson, JOLLINASIMPSON, and I'm also calling in opposition of AB 387. I am concerned that AB 387 would cause the elimination of an established workforce through the restraint of trade. AB 387 may have disproportionately negative financial impacts on rural and BIPOC midwives, their students, and communities. Additionally, I am also concerned that the bill's utter disregard for accessibility and equity in the pathway to licensure and training. AB 387 restricts trade of long-established small businesses operating in the state of Nevada. It also includes historically women-owned businesses that serve rural and marginalized communities. It would also restrict and in some cases eliminate the midwifery workforce by leaving only one pathway to licensure and eliminating the ability of CPM students to find preceptors in their own communities, causing students to incur deep financial losses in pursuit of their training. The lack of diversity, accessibility, and equity in midwifery education has long been documented, and this bill perpetuates historical biases and disenfranchisement. Historically, underrepresented and marginalized midwives in states with this particular type of legislation are demonized and pushed out of the marketplace. This bill would create an environment that eliminates the primary educational pathway of future licensed midwife students who would choose the apprenticeship model to CPM certification. Over 1,100 Nevada residents have responded to this poll on Nellis in opposition to this bill, and I am unified with them and other families who are in opposition of AB 387 because it does not represent us, and it is not accessible, and it is not equitable. It is also important to know that I am a midwife of color who has extreme barriers, and those who say that it is not a barrier, a financial barrier, or you can get a scholarship or things like that, have obviously never tried to get into a midwifery school or any school. That means that it's a greater burden for us to try to extend our training and get what we need from also historically marginalizing and historically racist educational systems. So to say that there are no barriers or that the barriers are minimal means that they have not walked a day in my skin. They have not stepped through the hoops that I've had to step through to get through the training that I've needed to get, being closed out from midwives who would no longer take... We
appreciate you calling and sharing it with us. We do have to move on to the next caller, but thank you, Ms. Simpson. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 676. Please fully state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and maybe.
My name is Rebecca Wells, WELLS, and I'm a Nevada midwife, and I oppose this bill. I was honored to be given the opportunity to learn the trade of midwifery through the age-old tradition of apprenticeship with two of Nevada's most experienced midwives. They began helping women deliver their babies outside of the medical model and in their own homes in the late 1970s and early 1980s. Between the two of them, they represent approximately 5,000 deliveries over more than 4 decades. One of them is still helping women have their babies and also opposes this bill. During my apprenticeship, they conscientiously passed their knowledge and experience to me as we attended births together over the course of approximately 3 years. This bill seeks to eliminate this pathway to midwifery and instead replace it with only one exclusive path. There is only one organization with which to obtain a CPM certificate, and requiring one in Nevada to practice midwifery will severely limit those who can assist other women in out-of-hospital deliveries. There will always be women who wish to deliver their babies outside of the medical model. If the number of midwives are limited, then those women are left with limited choices. Most, if not all of them, will still deliver their babies in their home, but they will do so without any type of trained attendant. We know this because we have been watching the results in other states who license one type of midwives while criminalizing other midwives. If those women have the ability to travel to Nevada for their births, they often do. If they don't, they will go it alone. If this bill passes as written, it will severely limit trade in Nevada. Please note that this bill was written and is supported by only 2 of Nevada midwives. The remainder, approximately 40, are opposed to this bill, but many of them are in favor of SB 271, which is another bill for licensing midwives. Proponents of this bill claim that this will only affect those CPMs who wish to be licensed, but that's patently false. They have written into the bill a requirement that midwives who wish to remain without a license have to have their client sign a form provided by their bill stating that their board stating that they are unlicensed. Our clients already know this. This is what they are choosing. We do not wish to be governed by their licensure bill, but rather to be left alone to continue doing what women have been doing for each other since the beginning of time. Thank you.
Thank you for the testimony, Ms. Wells. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 866. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hello, my name is Janelle Johngrass, and you spell that JANELLEJOHNGRASS. I am a Las Vegas resident. I have 4 children who are all born in Nevada and all home births. I never intended to be a home birthing mother. With my first birth, I was going to have a water birth at Summerlin Hospital with Dr. Harder. The day I was in labor, upon arriving at the hospital, I was informed that my doctor, Dr. Harder, was not on staff, and that the doctor on staff was not comfortable with water birth, and that it would no longer be a delivery option for me. I was then put into a bed. I went from being home where I was able to move my body freely to being stuck in a bed. The fetal monitor kept slipping down my stomach, causing the baby's heart rate to go missing, which caused my anxiety to spike. When the doctor came in, they told me they needed to do an ultrasound to see the baby's positioning, upon which we discovered he was breached and said that I needed to have an emergency C-section. I asked the doctor to give me a moment so I could process and talk it out. She said, "What is there even to think about? If you don't have a C-section, you will kill your baby." I researched birth, and I knew that I had some options to try to get the baby to move. I could walk around or do spinning baby techniques. They told me no. I had to stay in the bed. When my doula arrived, I asked her if she knew any other options. I so desperately wanted to have a natural birth. I knew that having a C-section was a difficult delivery to heal from, and I wanted to prevent myself from having one. I also knew women had delivered breech babies naturally. She told me my only option was to hire a midwife. She quickly made phone calls and found one. I did have the natural birth I wanted. I just had to do it at home, and I didn't kill my baby. The doctor was wrong. My home birth changed my life and empowered me as a woman, mother, and a person. I urge you to vote against this bill. My birth experience would not have happened with regulated midwives. This bill would take the choice away from mothers to birth on their terms with who they choose. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your call. For those listening over the internet, we will take one more in opposition and then transition over to testimony in neutral. Broadcasting, if we could go to our last caller in opposition. And those who are in opposition, I would again encourage you, if you are on the line and did not get the opportunity to testify, please send in your written remarks to our committee manager, and she will include them in the record. Again, you can email the assembly at asmcl@asm.state.nv.us. Thank you. And broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last 3 digits of 753. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin.
Thank you. For the record, Magdalena Alvarez, Alvarez. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Alvarez.
Thank you. I'm speaking today on behalf of Nevada Friends of Midwives. Since 2002, NFOM has worked to protect parental rights as they pertain to childbirth. We have hundreds of members, and we are strongly opposed to this bill. I would like to share my personal story. When I was pregnant with my third baby, I lived in Arizona. I had done a lot of research, and I knew what I wanted for my birth. I was under the care of a licensed CNM using Medicaid. Imagine my disgust and anger when I learned that the state board prohibited her from attending me at her birthing center simply because I had had a previous cesarean. I looked for other options, but home birth midwives in Arizona are also not allowed to attend VBACs. This prohibition is not based on evidence, and I knew it. So my choices were to give birth in a hospital or give birth at home alone. Both were out of the question for me. So I moved back to Nevada to give birth. Yes, that's correct. I moved from another state to have the birth I wanted. I gave up my Medicaid coverage despite being an extremely poor person, and I hired an unlicensed midwife after very carefully informing myself in regards to her experience and training. In weekly support groups, we've heard hundreds of stories similar to mine. The authors say that parents will still be able to hire whomever they like, but this bill is missing important intention language. If the intent is to license CPMs, then all other midwives must be completely exempt. They're not carrying drugs, they're not practicing medicine, and they do not wish to bill Medicaid. They don't belong in this bill. Section 15.2 requires non-licensed midwives to provide a so-called informed consent form. This requirement implies incorrectly that non-licensed midwives need permission of the state, though all midwives in Nevada have always been legal, and attempts to place them under a board have been rejected again and again. Notably, in 1982, the Attorney General refused to place midwives under the Board of Health, stating that it would restrict trade and be paramount to a licensure scheme. This language is denigrating and marginalizing. It is meant to manipulate public opinion against some midwives. Some of these midwives have been practicing since the 1980s and have delivered thousands of babies. It also implies that the parent is culpable in some way, who may have to answer to someone for their decisions. The agreements that parents and midwives make are intensely personal and private, and such a form is an invasion of privacy. The parents of Nevada have spoken loud and clear with your opinion poll. They are saying, "My body, my birth, my choice." Nevada Friends of Midwives hopes to see this bill dropped completely. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Alvarez. And again, thank you for everyone who called in opposition. At this time, we are going to move to testimony in the neutral position. I do not have anyone signed up to testify on video, so we will move directly to the phone lines. I would like to note, for those listening wishing to testify in the neutral position, that testifying in the neutral position means that you do not take a position on the bill. You are not in support of it or in opposition of it. You are in a neutral position, meaning you do not have a position on it. If your testimony is indicative of leaning in support or opposition, I will ask you to redirect your comments or terminate them and move on to the next caller. With that, broadcasting, if we could check the telephone line for anyone wishing to testify in the neutral position.
Testify in neutral on AB 387. Please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, to testify in neutral on AB 387, please press *9 now. Caller with the last three digits of 786, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Erin Lynch, ERINLYNCH, and I'm the Chief of the Medical Programs Unit at the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy, and I'm presenting in neutral for AB 387. The division analyzed the cost of adding certified professional midwives as a covered service by reviewing several studies and the savings to Medicaid programs. So our analysis used the cost savings methodologies in these studies and determined that there would be a cost savings. So overall, I'm pleased to say that our analysis resulted in a cost savings of about $409,830. Sorry, I really can't read finance numbers. So it's basically over $409,000. And so the medical savings on that was approximately $461,830. And there are some system costs involved at about $52,000, but still overall, we have a cost savings of over $409,000. So when you look at the fiscal note for the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy, you'll see negative fiscal numbers there, which means that it's a cost savings. Thank you.
And Ms. Lynch, if I could, you are testifying on behalf of the Division of Healthcare Financing and Policy?
Yeah, correct.
Correct. Okay, with the Department of Health and Human Services?
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. If you would, I would like to check with the members to see if there are any questions for you. Members, are any questions for Ms. Lynch? Okay, I have no questions. Thank you, Ms. Lynch, for your testimony. Broadcasting, if we could go to the next person in neutral.
Caller with the last three digits of 791. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Assembly members of the board. For the record, my name is Romina Paulucci, and I am a partera midwife in Las Vegas. I apprenticed here under NARM certified midwives known as CPMs, one of which was NARM or NEET certified. And for lifestyle and philosophical reasons, I did not sit for an exam and certify as a CPM. I'm so thankful that I did not, because what I feared then is here now, restricting women's choice over their own bodies and families.
Unfortunately, we are in the neutral category, so we're not taking any testimony for people who are in opposition of the bill at the time. You can email your remarks. Thank you. Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Chair, there are no more callers for neutral at this time.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I would like to call Assemblymember Monroe Moreno back to give any closing remarks.
Thank you, Chair Hadegay, and thank you to those that called in support and in opposition and neutral on this piece of legislation. I think what we've heard are a lot of passionate comments coming from the callers. And in response to the opposition, a number of the comments were made about the bill as it was introduced. And as I said in our opening statement, we too were in opposition to some of the items in the bill as introduced. And therefore, those items were discussed and addressed in the amendment. As I said when I opened this hearing, I started having meetings on this bill back in April of 2020. A number of the people who called in opposition, which are included in the amendment. There was also reference to, I believe it's SB 271. That is a bill that is being carried by Senator Hammond in the Senate. We, as a group of supporters of this bill, had numerous meetings with the stakeholders of that bill. However, I did go out of my way earlier today and have communications with Senator Hammond about his bill, wondering where it was at in the Senate. I am not in that body, so I'm not sure how things are processing through their House. His comment was that his bill has a number of problems, and therefore he doesn't know if he'll be able to fix it in time for this legislative session. So I don't know where that bill is going. But I would like to thank an organization named Make It Work. It's an organization that works with women's healthcare issues, and especially in our communities of color, which you heard a number of times from some of the opposition. Make It Work offered to hold community stakeholder meetings for me to get information that I was not able to get because we're in legislative session and my schedule was a little tight. And with those meetings, opened the conversation to people that we had not had a conversation with leading into this legislative session, but also continuing the conversation that we had had with a number of midwives to address some of the issues. That last meeting was actually Saturday afternoon, almost a 4-hour meeting with Ms. Jolene Simpson, who did call in opposition, gave a number of suggestions that are included in the amendment. Well, I admit I did not have a conversation with everyone that was in opposition. Some of the people were very threatening in some of their emails and Facebook posts. So I felt that it was not in the best interest of my time or in the best interest of the state to carry on a conversation that was not going to be fruitful to come to a mutual conclusion. I want to thank you. There was a lot of information that was shared today. You probably know more about midwives than you ever thought you would want to know. But as a mother and as a grandmother who my daughter had options, I want moms, families in the state of Nevada to have options. And yes, women have the last voice over what happens to their bodies. The very last voice. No one else can say what happens to a woman's body other than that woman. This bill does not take that option away at all. The only thing it does is give another option for families and for mothers. But it also gives the state an opportunity to have midwives who choose to become licensed an opportunity to save money on the state side. And no one in any way interferes with a woman's choice, and the licensure is optional. And for Mr. Watkins, who called in, those were very good points that we had not thought of, and I would love to talk to you as we continue the conversation to get this bill where it needs to be so that we can work session. I thank you for your time tonight, and I appreciate it. And I hope to have your support for Assembly Bill 387.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Monroe Moreno. With that, committee members, I will close the hearing on Assembly Bill 387. Our last agenda item for this evening is going to be public comment. And while we are giving those listening over the internet time to call in, I am going to read our public comment housekeeping room. I'd like to remind everyone that the period for public comment is an opportunity to discuss general matters that fall within the purview of this committee. The public has already been given time to support or oppose specific legislation. We open and close hearing on bills so that we can establish a public record of the testimony on a bill. Therefore, public comment is not intended to be a continuation of a bill hearing. I would like to remind everyone that we limit public comment to 2 minutes. And again, please address your remark to issues that fall within the Commerce and Labor Committee. If you direct your remarks to issues over which we have no jurisdiction, I will ask you to redirect your remarks or terminate them. Please be respectful of committee members and other witnesses. Do not comment on testimony provided by other speakers, and do not make personal attacks. You may always submit written remarks for inclusion in the meeting record. With that broadcasting, is there anyone on the telephone line wishing to give public comment?
To take your place in public comment, please press *9 now to join the queue. Caller with the last 3 digits of 791, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Romina Paulucci. I ask everyone here today that they remember a time in their lineage before obstetric care colonized and erased cultural traditions. What we're speaking on today doesn't only affect people who still don't remember or still have not yet returned to more of their traditional cultural natural roots due to deterioration and previous colonization. I think all of us here have had some sort of erasure because we cannot recall birth before 200 years ago when doctors and obstetric care came into being. The women that I serve choose to see me instead of someone else because I speak her language. I also hold birth to be sacred rite of ancestral passage, and most likely her obstetrician will not. So she may choose to continue to be supported by someone who aligns with her cultural and familial traditions. For this reason, I ask that you recall your previous lineage again, before obstetric care. I ask that you remember. I ask that you speak with your families and see what came before. I also urge you to look to SB 271, a bill whose sponsors have given time to hear and appropriately reword sections of the bill in response to midwives who align with this kind of birth and women's choice and familial, traditional, cultural birth. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony, Ms. Palucci. For public comment, broadcasting, is there anyone else on the telephone line wishing to give public comment?
Caller with the last three digits of 866, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 866, please press *6 to unmute.
Hello, this is Janelle Johngrass again. JANELLEJOHNGRASS. I heard a lot of comments tonight about why women midwives need to be regulated to protect the woman giving birth and the family. And I want to say, as a woman that has empowered herself and educating herself on birth, it is not the government's job to do my due diligence on being educated and empowered on birth practices and who is in attendance with me at my birth. And so, again, I urge you to vote against this bill, as it is taking too much power away from...
Sorry, you are speaking... Your earlier remarks completely fell within the purview of this committee, so I allowed them to go on. But if you're speaking to the bill, I have to stop you because we have closed testimony on the bill. Thank you. Broadcasting, if we could take the next caller.
Caller with the last three digits of 733, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You will have 2 minutes and may begin. Caller with the last three digits of 733, please press *6 to unmute.
Hi, for the record, my name is Camila Santiago, Camila Santiago. I'd like to testify because I'm originally from Brazil, but currently I'm a U.S. citizen in Nevada at heart since I arrived here to stay in 2007. Both of my children were born here and at home with the assistance of a CPM. And if you don't know, Brazil is known by the country of C-sections. I consider that I only could achieve that because I was here and I was benefited by the freedoms that this state has to offer for home birth mothers and as well providers. I've always had a passion for midwifery, and I chose to advance my midwifery studies while I was also becoming a mother. If it wasn't for the PEP process and our local Nevada preceptors, I would not have the financial means and time and means to become a CPN when I chose to become one. Because I'm an immigrant and my college TUs in my country were not valid here, make accredited institutions, I would particularly require me prerequisites such as ESL, English 101, Math 101, plus the midwifery prerequisites. And making this process absolutely more expensive and more time-consuming, more inaccessible in comparison to someone that was born here, attended high school or college in the U.S. In a brief addition, this bill requires taking an anti-bias racism training. NARM already requires that type of training from phase 1 of the PEP process. And the bridge requires 50 CUs from accredited sources like MEEC, ACOG, ACNM, state health departments, nursing, perinatal associations. So do you know what's best in an anti-racism training?
You calling in for public comment. We do have to move on. Broadcasting, if we could take the next caller in public comment, please.
If you recently joined the call and would like to participate in public comment, please press *9 now. Caller with the last three digits of 261, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes. Caller with the last three digits of 261, please press *6 to unmute. Caller with the last three digits of 433, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
Hi, my name is Corinne Flatt, CORRINEFLATT, and I wasn't fast enough to get into a different queue, but I would like to just encourage the committee members of this committee to please go look at the opinion poll that is on the Nevada Legislature on the Nellis regarding this bill, because the parents of Nevada have spoken. Thank you. This ends my comment.
Thank you for your comments, Ms. Slapp. Broadcasting, if we could go to the next caller, please. Public comment.
Caller with the last three digits of 261, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You'll have 2 minutes and may begin.
My name is Mary Gilbert, MaryGilbert, for the record. And I just want to state that Medicaid being able to cover this bill or to cover midwives would make a radical difference in our community. I'm the director of a nonprofit here in Reno. I work with marginalized communities and unsheltered neighbors. And many people currently do not have access to midwifery care because it is not covered under Medicaid. And I think that that's really important to note. When I gave birth to my son 12 years ago, I paid $15,000 out of pocket because I wasn't insured. When I paid for my midwife, it cost less than $5,000. There's a radical difference in how much money can be saved with midwifery care. And that's all. Thank you.
Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Caller with the last three digits of 719, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and maybe.
Kathy Buchanan, for the record, Buchanan. I'm a former medical biller and coder, and I believe the Affordable Care Act includes all races and individuals and was taken in great consideration for numerous amounts of dollars and things to be spent, SOPs to be formatted, and licensed midwives would adhere to the scorecard given to other providers by the state of Nevada. And I would like your board of Nevadans to side on Nevada's policies, which are in line with Nevada Medicaid, and that is providing more coverage and accountability to a certain set of standards. And I thank you for all of your time and consideration. That's my comment.
Broadcasting, next caller, please.
Chair, the public line is open and working, but there are no more callers at this time.
Okay, thank you so much. And committee members, thank you so much. I know it's been a long day for us with two commerce and labor agendas. I appreciate the attention that everyone has so diligently gave to this bill hearing and to those who called in to testify and support opposition, neutral, and public comment. We will see you on Wednesday. Again, please be on the lookout for the time on the agenda. We will be starting earlier than our normal scheduled start time at 1 p.m. And thank you again for being here. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you.